OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
7:30 on this Friday morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. Eoin and Adrian with you right the way through until 10 o'clock this morning, and another packed couple of hours coming your way. Shane Dowling will be joining us for a chat about his early enforced retirement. We've got Kieran Donaghy on to chat about the club versus county debate currently underway in the GAA. We're going to tell you exactly what's happening in the Premier League with Monday's headlines today, featuring Phil Egan a little bit later on. And Armagh is next up in our Mt Rushmore series. So we've got Kernan and Niall McCoy selecting the four names on Armagh's Mt Rushmore. Plenty coming up, as well as Brian Kerr's take on City versus Liverpool in just a moment. Adrian, Barry, what's the crack?
Oh, and how are you getting on? You're only back in the door and you clearly haven't done your preparation.
Why do you say that?
You're describing it as a club versus county debate. Come on now. Have you paid any attention to what's going on during the week at all? Have you paid any attention to what the GPA have told you to think about this? It's not club versus county in any way, shape or form.
Oh, of course. My bad. What is the exact definition for the current impasse? Is the word impasse usable?
I mean, I don't think anything that sheds any negative light on this discussion is acceptable on it, but it'll be my sort of main view, having read that GPA statement during the week. All is generally fine with the world. Nothing really to see here. Certainly not the players' fault. Let nobody take any personal responsibility in any of this. But if there's blame to be portioned out, let's point the fingers in every which way, but at ourselves.
Give us the Adrian Barry 5-word breakdown of the GAA saga this week.
Oh, Jesus, saga. I did 5 words is never going to get... In classic GAA fashion, asking me to try and sum it up in 5 words is going to be a stretch. It's pretty shambolic. I've been reading an article in the Irish West Meath Independent this morning about what's going on there at county board level. The chairman wants the introduction of thermometers, and several delegates are offering unscientific opinion as to why that's just not going to happen, and ultimately isn't going to happen. So, look, there's been confusion, obviously, as Michael Dignan was saying at the show during the week. You've seen nothing on. I'm sure you've paid absolutely no attention to anything. You've been so busy sunning yourself in the Casas El Kerry or wherever you were, that you haven't paid any attention to what's going on, I'm sure. It's
pretty shambolic. I think that's a good 3-word Adrian Barry breakdown of the current situation. So thank you for that. I was eager to actually see your face this morning, eager to see everybody's face. Like I went down home, as you said, for the last couple of days. Barbers were closed when I went home, so I thought I'd be coming back to the big city, being the most shabby-looking human in the world, until I was watching the game last night, Adrian. Well, the first game, that is, and realised that barbers in the UK don't actually open until tomorrow. And you'd know it by looking at Eric Dyer's head. Is this the worst haircut that has ever appeared on a Premier League ground?
Oof. See, it is difficult, right? He's obviously, what he's done there now is he's had a go at that himself, and he's been delighted with it. He's like, look at this great job I've done, completely forgetting that the back has got no attention at all. That's horrible.
Well, the thing is, he's carved himself out a nice niche there as one of the great Mohawk sporting footballers. There hasn't been too many outside of David Beckham. Has there been another Mohawk wearing player? I challenge anybody to.
Yeah.
There hasn't really. Freddie Ljungberg, says Emma, of course.
Yeah, great shout.
How could we forget that? So there's a like.
Did Aguero have one? Aguero had one.
Aguero had one at one point, didn't he? Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. So there's your Mt Rushmore: Eric Dyer, David Beckham, Freddie Ljungberg, and Sergio Aguero. Your Mt Rushmore of Mohawks this morning. The Mt Rushmore of Armagh coming a little bit later on this morning, and the big news, of course, this week. I'm sure you were all looking very slick, as that the barbers are back open, but looking around Dublin, it doesn't actually seem that that's the case, and certainly looking in the Premier League, you'd know the UK aren't on it just yet. So, as I say, plenty coming up this morning, but the big news last night is that Liverpool were basically on the lash all week, beaten 4-0 by Manchester City. Here's Brian Kerr's thoughts.
The Liverpool players are in the tunnel. The Manchester City players have lined up in a guard of honour. And Jurgen Klopp has emerged out onto the pitch. De Bruyne steps up right-footed, no difficulties this time. He just places it low into the left-hand corner. And with 25 minutes gone, Manchester City lead Liverpool by a 1-0. Kevin De Bruyne from the penalty spot. Sterling onto his right foot, shoots, and it's 2-0. Raheem Sterling scores against his former club. Quick-fire counter-attack from Manchester City leaves the champions reeling. And it's Raheem Sterling, who I thought might have lost his chance as he looked to lose his footing, but he managed to redeem the situation and slide it past Alisson. Phil Foden for 3, and it is just that. Phil Foden with a smashing finish. What a run of form the youngster's in. And what a first half this has turned out to be for Manchester City, who lead Liverpool by 3-0. City will break now. They have a 3-on-3 here. Kevin De Bruyne has it. De Bruyne picks the perfect pass to Raheem Sterling. Sterling onto his left foot inside the area, and it's an own goal by Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. A fourth for Manchester City. And once again, the home side showed just how clinical they can be. Kevin De Bruyne, once again the creator for Raheem Sterling. He may well get the goal. Oxlade-Chamberlain was sliding in to try and clear and had the final touch. But how good was that from Kevin De Bruyne? So Brian Kerr was alongside me for tonight's game at the Etihad. And Brian, it's not unusual for there to be a bit of a hangover after a good party. 4-0 to Manchester City. Were you expecting there to be quite that much of a hangover for Liverpool?
No, I expected Manchester City to win tonight. I just didn't think that Liverpool would have quite the edge to their game that would be required. And remember, these two teams are exceptional sides. The number of points they got last year was 98-97, wasn't it? But Manchester City 98 and Liverpool 97. That's exceptional in top division of English football. They got so many games. Obviously, City got 100 the year before. But I think once you drop a couple of percent below the standards that you set on a week in, week out basis, then you can have a performance like Liverpool tonight. And I don't think that, I wouldn't say the build-up to the game was the type of preparation that they normally have. I'm sure the Klopp tried to ensure that the training that they went through their organisational stuff and patterns of play, and let's expose Manchester City when they play out from the back, squeeze them, try and intercept something high up the pitch. When they attack us, can we counter and play long ball over the top? I think that work was done. But once they lost the first goal and the second goal, I felt the level of their effort and the quality of their play just disintegrated really by their standards, and they were well beaten.
Yeah, you think of the level that Liverpool got to at Anfield earlier in the season, or even the game they were beaten at the Etihad 2-1 last season. The pace of that game.
Yeah.
Well, tonight was really entertaining and very open, and it could have been 8-3 to Manchester City, and it might have been fair enough. It was a different type of game. There wasn't that real edge that you would want. No,
there wasn't the same. There was no cutting edge. I mean, there's nothing about the results has any great effect on the season overall. It might have an effect on the future and the morale of the Manchester City players in terms of Klopp wanting to inspire his players to play well, more consistently over the remaining 6 games. It may be that Guardiola would look at some of the players he played tonight who haven't been regulars in the team, like Laporte, obviously because of injury. Mendy, who has been very much a bit player because of injury last few seasons. But most of all, I think young Foden has kind of come into a really big game now tonight and done his stuff. We discussed it earlier where I'd seen him in the game at Manchester United, which was a big game, the derby match. He played wide on the right just before the close down, the lockdown due to the virus. And he was quite ineffective in the intensity of that match against Manchester United. Old Trafford, big occasion, playing wide. Whereas tonight, he looked very comfortable in the game tonight. Would he be as comfortable? Would he have been as comfortable if Robertson was right at it tonight? Because Robertson made several mistakes. He got turned so easy on the goal. He turned inside out by Foden, that beautiful little 1-2. So the answer to that still remains hanging in the air till we see these teams playing against each other again next season.
That's the problem with this game. Everything feels unanswered until we see them again next season, and Liverpool don't really have a meaningful match for another 2 months now until the season starts again. So a lot, and maybe too much, is going to be read into what happened tonight. Like, are there things that Jurgen Klopp will have seen tonight in any way that will concern him ahead of next season?
I wouldn't think he'd be over concerned. I mean, he extracted the maximum from those players this year. I mean, one of his great qualities is improving these players. When he signed many of them, I mean, when he signed Andy Robinson, there wasn't any great hullabaloo about it when he signed him for Hull for maybe it was 8 million, maybe it was 10 million, maybe it was 6 million. You know, there was nobody saying, yes, Van Dijk Yes, the goalkeeper Allison, they were signed for massive amounts, and people said they made the difference. But he also made the difference of improving those individual players, playing Alexander Arne, leaving him in the team, the improvement in Henderson as the years go on. Fabinho, who was a bit of a bit player last year when he first came to the club, didn't really establish himself. At the second half of the season, began to look a better player. Now he's the first choice. He has to be in the team.
Probably their best player tonight.
Yeah, maybe, but there wasn't like it would have been easy enough. There was no, but he's improved each of these players. So he'd be looking. I don't think he'd be looking at them with too much of a jaundiced eye tonight. He'd be kind of going, hold on, these guys a bit what they've done, winning the Champions League last year. Yes, one match competition. We won the Super Cup. We won the World Championship, winning a couple of games to win that. But they've done it, and they won whatever the equivalent, what's it called, the Charity Shield. All those things. But the ultimate prize for them was winning the Premier League. 30 years since anyone had done it for Liverpool. So he's not going to be too critical of them tonight. You might be disappointed. You bring on Keita and Origi, and they don't really have much influence on the game. Williams comes on and he does a few bits, but you're going to look at them as the season goes on. You mentioned Harvey Elliott to me during the commentary. They'll get a go, I think, between now and the end of the season, but they'll want to win another game or two. And I think we'll find they'll be brought on in matches if the matches are being won. Yeah. I don't think we'll see them starting in matches unless he thinks we can win this with 8 of our best and 2 or 3 of the younger players.
Geez, Manchester City are a hard team to sum up. You watch them there. Are Manchester City a team that when there is a weakness in the opposition, there's no better team, certainly in English football, maybe in worldwide club football right now, than Manchester City exposing a weakness? But when it's tough, is that where the problem still is? Is that where the doubts still are? Like we saw last week against Chelsea, that when Chelsea actually went, they've lost 8, it's hard to see that performance with a team that have lost 8 times this season.
Well, we still analyse the game tonight. How many opportunities did they cough up to Liverpool if Liverpool had been that bit sharper tonight? They weren't sharp. They messed up. I mean, Salah was in. He hits the goalkeeper with it. When you were right, you spotted in commentary. You said goalkeeper Edison was a long way off the line, and we've often seen Salah chip the keeper when he's off the line.
Him.
That's right. And in the past, but he didn't do it tonight, and he went for a high shot, which the goalkeeper saved. It falls for Mane, and he misjudges his run and hits off his shin and goes out wide. There was one in the second half where he ran over the ball when he tried to take it past the goalkeeper, and Salah missed the chance where he came in the inside. He hits the post, it comes back out. But they got several other good opportunities that they didn't make Manchester City pay for the mistakes, and a lot of the mistakes were either the high line where the centre halves were caught out of position, didn't react to the pace of the attackers, or else it was in trying to play the build-up play through Rodri or through Gundogan in the middle of the field, and the pass was intercepted under pressure from Liverpool players. And we've seen Liverpool doing that to them before. We've seen other teams do it to them more by sitting back, allowing them to come on and counter-attacking. And think of Traore with Wolves, how he was devastating on the counter-attack in both games when Wolves beat them 2-0, 3-0, but 3-2 rather. So those things are there, but those deficiencies are also part of the joy of watching City, that they take so many risks, that he is such a purist of a manager. There's very few games where you'll see City deliberately sit in a 4-5-1 or a 4-3-3 with the 2 wide front players sit. It's always, we want to dominate possession and we'll take risks and play it out. There's only one game, I think, with Liverpool last year where they played it very tight and the back 4 sat in place and it finished up 0-0 at Anfield. And it was one of the few times where I saw him, where I've so rarely seen them compromise on the idea we'll dominate possession and we'll play our game and to hell with the opposition, and even if they're Liverpool. That day they did. So I think if you did that a little bit more often, they would have more consistent results against the better teams. This year they didn't do that well against the better teams, but the Champions League has to be the holy grail for them this season.
we've touched on how good Phil Foden was. Kevin De Bruyne tonight as well. Every time he got on the ball, some of his slide rule passes, taking 4 or 5 players out of it, were just out of this world. We're getting towards that who's footballer of the year, and there was a real momentum behind Jordan Henderson before the break. Maybe Virgil van Dijk is once again the outstanding player, but in terms of talent, it's hard to get anyone to match De Bruyne. Is he your footballer of the year?
I hadn't thought about it too much until you start bringing it up during the match tonight, because I don't have a vote in it. Like, I have votes in some things.
You also didn't back Jordan Henderson at 20-1.
I votes on the World 11 and the World Player of the Year. Yeah, through World Soccer I have. But I haven't thought about this one in great depth. But you think, I said to you during the match, and you corrected me, that it often comes from the team that wins the league. And you pointed out that in the past 2 years has been Van Dijk, probably because of his overall performance, and Liverpool won the Champions League. And the players' votes would have been before that anyway. The soccer writers' one would be after that. So Salah, I think the previous year when he was rattling in goals game after game, he won it. This year, De Bruyne has had seasons where last season was a difficult season for him with injury. This season he's come back fresher and not only been outstanding for Manchester City, been outstanding for Belgium as well. So I think, I wouldn't have a great problem because of the influence on Van Dijk in Liverpool winning the league. But I think for attack, it's always more difficult to do it in the attacking part of the pitch, and that's why it kind of surprises that Aguero has never won it. But he's not going to win it this year. Because he's been overshadowed by De Bruyne's performance, even though he's top scorer. He's been overshadowed by De Bruyne's performance. And when you look at Liverpool, Salah didn't have as good a season as he's had in the 2 previous seasons, even though he scored a substantial number of goals. Firmino didn't score enough goals, although he's been brilliant. Sané has had a magnificent season. But would you say he was more important to the team than Henderson and Van Dijk? Probably not. Both Liverpool's full-backs have been brilliant. The young full-back will get the young player of the league, so that covers him. It'd be unusual for a left-back to get it in a season, a championship-winning season. So if you want to vote for De Bruyne, you go ahead.
No. I backed Jordan Henderson at 20-1.
Okay, well that's fine. Okay,
so I want you to go with Henderson.
If somebody to go with De Bruyne. Somebody gives me a vote, I'm voting Jordan Henderson and sharing the spoils.
One last thing. We've had a lot of coverage on the show this week about the League of Ireland and the restart and on, off, and it seems it is now going to restart on the 31st of July. The FAI board have approved the plan that it'll be one down automatically and another team going into a playoff. We had David Rowe from Sligo on Tuesday night, very frustrated with the process behind the scenes and with just 13 more games, the danger that's there for Sligo Rovers as a club. We had Vinnie Perth on saying, well, they wanted 27 games, but it didn't seem too many others did, but that obviously everybody has their own vested interest, so that's the way it's going to be. And then we'd Shamrock Rovers, who were at the centre of all this because they went with the First Division teams.
They're in both leagues.
They're in both leagues, but their vote is only with the Premier Division teams and went with the First Division teams.
But the chairman voted with the First Division teams.
Yes, but explaining their side of the situation, that they never changed their mind and that they voted the way that they felt was right. And then we had a situation where the FAI board, after Niall Quinn had said football was back, saying, well, actually, we're going to delay this and have another look. They've had another look. It looks as though it's back and it's settled unless the clubs kick up a storm. What have you made of it all?
I've made it all. It's been a very difficult situation for everybody. I think there were too many promises made too early on about the possible financial settlements with the clubs if they got going again. The idea of the streaming being very rewarding, the streaming of matches, and for the public to pay to see them seemed to be one of the main financial incentives or source of where the income was going to come to fund the clubs having matches with no crowds at the game. So I think initially the clubs were probably misled as to the extent of what money would be available, and then obviously there was promises about money that might come from UEFA and FIFA, and that dragged on till quite recently, where the FIFA money came through. it's been a very awkward situation. There's so many different parties with vested interest. You have 10 different businesses in the Premier League. You also have 8 different businesses or 9 different businesses in the second division. Shamrock Rovers, as I said, playing in both leagues, who all have a different modus operandi, but also have different levels of income and levels of expenditure, and it's quite difficult to manage them unless you know a lot of the personalities involved. I think some of the people in the FAI who were trying to find a solution didn't know the personalities involved and didn't know the industry very well because they weren't involved in it ever before. So I think that made it very difficult. The fact that they hadn't got the experience of League of Ireland, that might have made it easier. You also had the issue of the players their wages being stopped and depending on the government payouts and so on, and then the PFAI's side of it, where they're fighting for the players' side of it and fighting very strongly, and sometimes making, I think, statements that didn't help the whole situation. So it's been a combination of factors that has led to where we are now, where there was a lot of I think all the clubs are worn out from the discussions, the number of meetings. As we all know, Zoom meetings aren't so easy on the head and the brain. They are quite draining, even in my own experiences of a few of them. I can only imagine what it's been like handling some of those meetings, to handle them, be involved with them and try to come up with solutions without sitting around the table face to face and looking for a bit of compromise. There's a falseness in that whole area of the Zoom calls, I think. The outcome is there. I think that the Premier League clubs had a very, very good case in saying if there's only half the matches, there should only be half the outcome at the bottom of the table. I don't think that how many clubs have come up from the First Division in recent years and survived and not gone down in either the first year or the second year?
But does this not make it far more competitive both in the Premier Division and in the First Division, that it'll mean an awful lot of these clubs will have an interest far further into the season, and in terms of the integrity of the league, that if there's only one team going down and there's a fear that maybe one club has thrown in the towel already, that they'll be the team to go down, and suddenly then you're 4 or 5 teams with nothing really to play for.
Yeah, but it's not forever. We're only getting through a short season here to get it over, to get the next one started as quick as we can. The fact that 9 of the Premier clubs voted for something that obviously suited them a little bit. The thing that would have suited the most had there been no relegation and that 2 teams are coming up. But then where do you find a couple of more teams to make a First Division a practical, viable league? They aren't out there. But I think the fact that 9 of the clubs out of 10 voted for something showed a fair degree of unanimity of how they felt about the whole thing. So look, I would have to say, while I admire the clubs in the First Division for battling and scrapping and staying in football, in what's is often referred to as the Round Ireland League, I still think that the clubs in the Premier League deserve to have a bigger say in what the eventual outcome is. But look at if it's settled now and decisions been made by somebody that had authority. It seemed like there was far too many groups had authority to have a say in it as well. I got confused about who was making the decision in the end.
It did
look at this. I'm telling you, leads me on to say, roll on the All Ireland League.
Oh yeah,
and we get on with it.
Where is that?
Where is it? Well, where it is, I think there's a lot of support from the clubs. I think there's a lot of support. I think by far the majority of clubs in the Republic are for it. I think the FAI are for it. I think there's been a great move in the NIFL League and the Northern Ireland League I think the support is there from the vast majority of clubs in Northern Ireland have accepted a formula for an All-Ireland League that is a very interesting formula and would make every match crucial. While teams would play two rounds within their own league before they go to the All-Ireland League part of it. It's a very interesting solution to the problem where, particularly in the Northern Ireland, they wanted to retain control of the UEFA places from within their own league. So, they're in a bit of disarray in that they haven't come to an agreement to restart. I think they've accepted they're not going to restart this season. But a lot of the clubs are very disappointed that that's how the outcome has been. I don't think they're over enamoured with how it's been managed by NIFL and the IFA. And I think among the clubs in Northern Ireland there's a will to get up and try to find an acceptable arrangement that everyone can go for to get an All-Ireland League. I don't think now is the right time, because obviously the financial structures that need to be in place to back it all, to make it very attractive to the clubs and to make it substantially better than both the individual leagues are at the moment, to improve the standards, to improve the facilities, to have bigger prize money in place. I think everything needs to settle down a little bit after the interruption of COVID to sporting life, to everyday life, to social life, to travelling, to all the aspects of living, really. I think that there needs to be more of a recovery in place where there's more movement of people and that crowds can come back to matches. I mean, that's the most obvious factor in all of this. I mean, what we're all hoping for, if there's a better league and an All-Ireland League comes into place, that there are bigger attendances at games with bigger sponsorship around that, more public interest, better broadcasting deals, all that. But that cannot happen in the current situation where we don't have anyone going to games, and we probably won't have, for the next month or two, and then we have to see where it goes after that.
Well, the word has gone round in Jacor, apparently. There's not 500 tickets for Richmond Park. There's only 499 because Brian Kerr is number one on that list.
Well, if there's a game, I would hope to be able to get in. I don't know under what guise, whether it be as a supporter, as a media person or whatever, but I would really...
You must have an honorary title. Do you not have an honorary title?
No,
I'm sure it's called you a few things down the years.
I've been called many things down there, but look, by many people at different clubs. But look, I'd love to get back to a game, a live game in our own league of any description, and the sooner the better. If it gets going by the end of July, that'll be great. And I hope that people are going to be allowed in, whether it's 100 or 500 or 1,000 in some of the grounds. It'll be great to have people back at matches and to get this most awkward of season going again, and obviously finished and prizes won and teams competing in Europe, and we know who's competing for us for next year in Europe as well. So let's get it up and get going again soon.
Hear, hear. Great stuff as always, Brian.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you. Enjoy tonight.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB Sports in your pocket. Listen to OTB Sports Radio 24/7.
Until that habit is broken, do you not realise how crazy those things were?
Watch your favourite OTB videos.
The benefit of being suspended, me and Scholesy were out every night, a couple of nights before the game.
Read all the latest sports news and opinions, all in one place, the OTB Sports app. Listen, watch, read. Wherever you are, we're always with you. The OTB Sports app, available to download now from your app store.
OTB AM.
You're welcome back. It is 8:01 and plenty more in that League of Ireland story, as Brian Kerr was discussing, coming up in the paper soon. Also plenty on City versus Liverpool throughout the morning. Adrian, I don't think you were truly enthused by the game as an important piece of evidence about the footballing talents of Liverpool or Manchester City last night. But one thing that you were truly enthused about in the build-up was the Guard of Honour Did it live up to the hype?
Oh, listen, as I said on Twitter last night, the greatest Guard of Honour I've seen since 2012. It was truly remarkable. I think the biggest thing we can take away from the game last night, it was so crap that there was not even anything that Roy Keane could say that could become a viral sensation off the back of it. Like, it was, I don't know. I was trying to, I think if either team had won 10-0, what could you really say about it? Like, Liverpool were suffering the, not literal, because most of them don't drink, but the hangover from obviously having won the league, and they had their night out. City's appetite to, knock Liverpool off their perch was so much that, look, what do you say about it? Like, I don't think there's any great conclusions. Are Manchester City a 4-0 better team than Liverpool? Of course they're not.
Well, that is true, but strange things happen in football. I don't agree with your assessment there that there is nothing that you can take from last night, that you just have to leave it. Like, both teams were essentially at full strength, or very, very close to full strength. Like, your point about Liverpool being on a hangover for a week and then saying that most of their players don't drink, are you not contradicting yourself a little bit there?
Well, the hangover doesn't have to be directly, it's not in the literal sort of Kerry sense on. It's like, just the philosophical hangover of having won the league and the step off in, like, you saw the interview with Klopp afterwards. Like, well, that was the highlight. That was absolutely the highlight of the evening. Both games provided unbelievable post-match entertainment.
But if you're saying that it doesn't mean much, or you can't read into much of it, you can clearly see by the body language and the tone of Jurgen Klopp afterwards that he has read a hell of a lot into what happened. That there's a man who, perhaps, I don't know how well Jurgen Klopp enjoyed himself over the last week, but his enjoyment is over now. It's Aston Villa are in the firing line this weekend. They are going to get slaughtered by Liverpool. There is going to be a backlash. That does say to me that something happened last night that pissed Jurgen Klopp off, or he saw something that he wasn't too pleased with. I think it's obviously not significant what occurred last night, but it's a bit of a gauge of how weird this whole season has been, not because of how flawless Liverpool were for a lot of it, but how flat Manchester City were for a good portion of the season too.
Yeah, look, Klopp couldn't come on in front of the camera and be all jokey. Like, he couldn't come on and go, it's great, listen, it didn't really matter, we won 4-0. He had to be a little bit spiky. He was maybe a little bit sort of OTT with the whole thing. But I just don't think that there's... I firmly believe that if even if we were sort of wound back a week where we were in a position where Liverpool were definitely going to win the league, but that they could have won it last night, it wouldn't have been 4-0. Like, you could easily have seen that. Look, I'm not saying there's absolutely nothing to be read into it. I'm sure that from City's point of view, they used all that as motivation. Like, Pep Guardiola couldn't have been more humble, I suppose, all week in his utterances about that stupid Guard of Honour and about what a great quality team Liverpool were and he's at the same crack after the game. So, like, he obviously used it as some motivation for him last night. Did they use that 4-0 last night City next season when they go in and go, listen, we're a better team than them? We proved it last season. I don't know. I'm just not sure for that one game. There's, like, City have nothing to play for, Liverpool have nothing to play for. Like, we'd spoken 6-8 months ago about, if and when Liverpool win the league, what are they going to do after that? Is the motivation still there to go on and get 140 points? Look, I don't know. They've relegation teams in Villa, and I think off the top of my head maybe Brighton. After that, over the next week, and then after that, I just can't see it. I think there'll be a lot of young players. I think that they'll rest players. I wouldn't be one for pouring over the dynamics of last night's match.
I think there is a bit to pour over. I think that you're right in the main. It's not significant, but I think there is a bit to pour over, which we'll do in a little while with Phil Egan. One thing, Adrian, you gave me a bit of a recap on everything I've missed over the last couple of days. You gave me your 3-word breakdown of the GAA impasse. The next thing I need to ask you for is a statistical breakdown of where we're at in Last Dance references, because before I went on holidays, it was probably averaging from about 8 per show to about 3 per show. Where are we currently at?
Well, the encouraging news on since you've been away is that cases are down.
Okay.
We get our regular updates every evening in the news. Cases are down 43% over the couple of weeks that you've been away. So it's hugely encouraging, I think, for the country since you were last here. Obviously, there's a massive fear that a second wave at any point could materialise, and people are very much on edge. That, to be aware of it, I suppose, just to pay a little bit of attention to. The US clearly obviously lagging behind where the rest of the country is at, maybe for the rest of the world is at, for maybe very obvious reasons. And they are recommending as well, I don't know if you've seen this, but they're recommending to Irish people not to travel abroad, like Spain, particular basketball, last dance hotspot. They're saying please avoid that if you can. And the government last dance task force been coming out every evening to plead with country just to stay in the country, if we've any chance of trying to stomp this thing out. They've erected screens. I don't know if you've been in any taxis, but they've actually gone to the extent of erecting screens now in taxis, just on the off chance that it comes up in over the course of conversation. Much the same in bars. You'll see if you go into any bar around Dublin, when you're up now, they've got screens up just in case the table next door suddenly breaks into a sort of analysis of Michael Jordan. Coffee shops the same, that they're just, these are the types of measures that they've had to take. If you're out and about, Eoin, with anybody that's not from within your own household, who essentially you can't trust, for God's sake, stay 2 meters away from them. It is a real possibility that it comes up in small talk, and if you're 2 meters away, you won't really hear it. Etiquette is not really, you're far enough away to avoid that conversation. We're nearly there, is the key takeaway in all of this. It's not the time to take any risks. Keep our foot on the throat of this thing on, and at least, hopefully, at some point soon, we'll have the release of a new Netflix or Amazon sensation, and it'll just help us wean us all off this thing.
There you go. It's good to be back on a Friday morning. It's 6 minutes past 8. Let's tell you what's coming up on OTB AM over the next hour and 55 minutes or thereabouts. So we've got Kieran Donaghy joining us soon at around 20 past 8. As you can see, that's right after Phil Egan and our Premier League chat. So Donaghy's going to be on chatting about the club versus county impasse. The three-word, what is it? A total shambles, as Adrian Barry put it earlier on. Donaghy will be talking about that very soon indeed. The sports pages at the later time of 8:45 this morning, plenty happening there. And Shane Dowling will be chatting about his unfortunately very early and enforced retirement at the age of 27 from intercounty hurling. He'll be joining us at around 5 to 9 this morning. Mt Rushmore, it's County Armagh time at 25 past 9. And if you think we're going to 10 o'clock, well, actually, we've got Keith Wood's State of the Union, a special edition of that on this Friday morning coming your way at 10 o'clock. But right now, it is time to get into Monday's headlines today. But before that, Phil, we may as well focus on what happened last night. Adrian Barry says that there wasn't a huge amount of significance attached to last night. But let me put this to you. How strong is the case for Kevin De Bruyne as Player of the Year after the evidence of last night? The clear evidence that he is the best footballer in the Premier League right now, when you even put him up against the Premier League champions, the runaway Premier League champions, it is clear that Kevin De Bruyne is still the best footballer in the Premier League. Can you make a case for him, a legitimate case for him as Player of the Year?
Yeah, welcome back, Eoin. Yeah, of course he can. I mean, he was brilliant last night, and he tends to be brilliant most weeks. But I suppose the argument you could make against him is that he's playing in a team that are 20 points off the Premier League champions, and you'd wonder if he's that amazing a player, why aren't City doing well? But as well, you kind of got an insight, even in the first 15 minutes of last night's game, and obviously at Stamford Bridge last week, that as good as City are, the way they stroke the ball around, there's vulnerabilities there. There was times, obviously, Mendy has been in the team, and as good as he is going forward, he just isn't part of that unit the way he tends to play players on. He was at fault, obviously, for the Pulisic goal last week as well. So De Bruyne is definitely in with a chance. Obviously, Mo Salah won it a couple of years ago when Liverpool didn't win the Premier League, so it wouldn't be unheard of for a player that's not from the league-winning team not to win it. So I don't know how it's going to come across this season, because obviously if the season had gone ahead as normal, the voting is quite early in the season anyway. So yeah, he's definitely in the mix. I suppose he's in the mix with Van Dijk. Henderson was one that was getting mentioned. I think I know Jamie Carragher mentioned Sadio Mane in commentary, that he was his player of the season. So I think they're the four that you're looking at.
Well, that was quite an extraordinary departure, I thought, Phil, for an actual Liverpool-aligned person to not say Jordan Henderson for Footballer of the Year. And it was almost sacrilege that Jordan Henderson wasn't Jamie Carragher's Player of the Year, because it seemed that he is almost the unanimous choice when we've spoken about Player of the Year this year. And I'm not sure I actually understand that, Phil. Like, I get the aura of Jordan Henderson and how brilliant a captain he's been for Liverpool, but I don't think you can put him into the top 2 or 3 players for Liverpool this season. At a stretch, you could possibly pick 5 players who have been better performers for Liverpool in the Premier League this season, plus Kevin De Bruyne. Like Jordan Henderson, you could make a case as comes 7th in the running for Player of the Year. Like, has this become a bit of a runaway train that perhaps we can't arrest at this point, that Jordan Henderson is going to get it because he is Captain Fantastic and it is based on the man of Jordan Henderson and the character of Jordan Henderson rather than the footballer that he is? Like, perhaps that's actually the way these things should be judged, but I'm just saying if you're judging it on the performances this season, should he actually be in with a legitimate shout, because that's what he is?
Yeah, well, I think one way I've kind of looked at it, and the reason I wouldn't give it to Henderson is because I would look at the impact of what would happen to Liverpool if Henderson was out of the team, or if Van Dijk was out of the team, or Mane was out of the team. Of those 3 players I've mentioned, the player that Liverpool could cope without the most, I think, is Jordan Henderson. I think if you take Mane out, then Liverpool obviously aren't as potent in attack. And then if you take Van Dijk out, they're a lot more vulnerable at the back. And they obviously have cover in midfield. They can play. They've a number of options in there. So I think what's impressed people about Henderson this season is just his leadership and, you know, just that drive that he has and the standard that he sets. And if a player isn't on it, you know, he'll bark at them. And I think that's where they're some of his strongest attributes. And you know, he's come up with some big moments in certain games. I think back to the Spurs game where he was at fault for the goal at Anfield that they conceded after a couple of minutes to Harry Kane, and you know, he equalised in the second half, and obviously Liverpool went on to win the game. So, you know, he's a strong character, and he's obviously, you know, he's the voice of that Liverpool team. But no, I can certainly see why some people would go for him, but I can also think why you wouldn't go for him.
He has to win it, is the thing. Like, I understand the point. Is he technically the best footballer in the Premier League at the minute? Probably not. I don't know the criteria, as like with the All-Star Selection Committee, what are the actual criteria for this. But given what Jordan Henderson has achieved in terms of his role at that Liverpool team, and I know that he'd moved into favourite for the thing even before COVID, I believe. But like everything that he's done even since that in terms of organising and pulling a lot of clubs together in terms of like raising money and awareness and all that sort of stuff, I just think you have to look at those factors.
Absolutely. I think as well, there's obviously a lot of emphasis on these awards, and probably too much. And I think obviously there's 2 of them. There's the Players' Player of the Year, and there's the Football Writers. And the Football Writers one might be a better indicator because, you know, from what you hear from players, that they're basically, there's a rep that comes into the dressing room, and some of them like will openly talk to other players, like, who are you putting down? Who are you voting for? And you know, they mightn't put that much thought into it. Whereas the Football Writers obviously will have seen all these players play for the whole season, and they will actually sit down and have a good think about it. So, saying that, Sterling got the Football Writers Player of the Year ahead of Van Dijk last season.
Yeah, he could be in with a shout as well, actually, this season. We're going to get into Monday's headlines today, Phil, for anybody who hasn't seen this slot. I think you did pretty well last time we did this. You managed to predict a good few of the unexpected things that were going to happen. So basically, you're going to give us 4 lines that we're definitely going to see on the back pages of Monday's newspapers. Your first one, very briefly, because we've kind of touched on this already. Liverpool still have 100 points in sight thanks to home comforts. So Aston Villa on Sunday, Phil, is this going to be a cakewalk for a resurgent Liverpool after City putting them waking them up a little bit last night?
Yeah, it was a sobering night for Liverpool, and I think Villa, unfortunately, are going to feel the backlash of it. Obviously, Liverpool have won every home game in the league this season. They're going to want to continue that. Doesn't help that Villa are not Manchester City either, and Liverpool are a different animal at Anfield. And I'd say they'll be hurting a little bit. Obviously, they're champions. It doesn't matter. But they'll just be a little bit annoyed. Not the fact that they lost the game, but, you know, there is people saying they were a little bit humiliated last night. So I'm sure Klopp, you could see it at his post-match interview last night after with Jeff Shreves, that he was angry, and there was shades of Tony O'Donoghue and Martin O'Neill in that one. But yeah, no, I think they'll bounce back and they'll beat Villa.
Is there any chance we're reading that one wrong, Phil? Like that, obviously Liverpool are now a team that maybe we saw some of the young players come off the bench last night, maybe he leans a bit more on that. Villa are obviously fighting for their lives. Is there any chance that, because it came up in commentary last night as well, that Villa are going to feel this wrath at the weekend? Is there any chance we're reading that wrong?
No, like, I think if you look back at the performance for Liverpool against Palace. That's kind of what I'm expecting. He could make a few changes, but I don't think he'll make that many changes because, you know, he stuck up for his players after the match, and he'd probably say, right, lads, I'm after sticking up for you. I'm going to pick you again. You have to go out and prove me wrong and show that Thursday was just a little bit of a one-off. And even though they lost 4-0 last night, they actually could have scored 3 or 4 goals. If they'd lost that game 6-4, it wouldn't have been a surprise.
Next headline. United could give Liverpool and City a run fair, F-E-R with a capital F, their money next season. Bruno Fernandes continues to pull the strings for Manchester United. It's Manchester United against Bournemouth tomorrow at 3 o'clock, Phil. It's pretty easy to tell what's going to happen here, according to you.
Yeah, obviously. Well, Bournemouth look dead and buried now, losing 4-1 to Newcastle. One thing they always did under Eddie Howe was to score goals. That's no longer happening. They've always conceded them. Manchester United are in great form. They're on this unbeaten run of 15 games in all competitions. Obviously, since Bruno Fernandes arrived, they've been a different looking side. I'll be honest with you, I didn't see this going so well from I'd seen him playing for Sporting Lisbon a good few times, and he looked like a player who just wasn't interested in being there, but maybe that's exactly what it was. He was just thinking, you know, I want to get out, and when I join a new club, I'll show them exactly what I'm made of. But now United have a few weapons in the artillery where obviously Pogba's back in the team, but opposition defenders now have to think of a few different players, whereas the criticism for United was great going forward on the break because they have pace, but if you just put a low block in against them, they're not going to be able to unlock the defence. But that's gone now. And you just see Fernandes, even his goal the other night, the first goal, obviously it took a bit of a deflection, but just, you know, he just has that presence of mind just to pull back a few yards, get himself on the D, and he's not shy of shooting. So I think United, it's been a great week for them. They obviously beat Brighton on Tuesday emphatically, then they watched Leicester and Chelsea lose, and then they'll be happy to see Liverpool thumped, even if it was against Manchester City, their neighbours. But we know the United supporters would rather see Liverpool suffer than Manchester City. So I think they'll definitely be fancying their chances of closing the gap on the top two next season. And, you know, they might even bring in 1 or 2 more players before the start of next season as well.
Your second last headline this morning, Phil, is Arsenal no longer part of the Wolf Pack. So you're obviously expecting Wolves to get the job done against Arsenal tomorrow night. Is this a Champions League chasing 6-pointer, or is that very generous in the prospects of Arsenal?
No, I think it's very generous on the prospect. If Arsenal win, all that's going to do is just put a dent in Wolves' pursuit of a Champions League place. As I said, like, we've obviously talked about Manchester City. That Court of Arbitration for Sport ruling in a couple of weeks is going to have a massive impact. Obviously, teams are trying to get into the top 4 because we don't know. You could finish 5th and think you're going to be in the Champions League, and then the ban could get overturned, and then you miss out in Champions League. So as things stand, we've got 4 teams chasing 2 spots, and Wolves are looking good. You know, they were a team I feared for at the start of the season, given the fact that they started the season so early with the Europa League qualifiers. I think the break has suited them. They're not conceding goals. They're even leaving Traore on the bench for certain games, and then he comes on and just causes havoc. So I think the thoughts of Adama Traore getting a run at that Arsenal defence is fairly frightening for Gunners fans. Yeah, it certainly is. And then last one is also a Champions League headline. What I'm seeing here is Leicester back on course to lock down Champions League place. Yeah, obviously Leicester got the news that they can play at the King Power even though Leicester is in lockdown, and I think this is actually a good game for them. And the second half was a lot more encouraging. They were pretty poor in the first half against Everton, but he brought on James Maddison, who obviously had a bit of an injury. He didn't show any signs of it in the second half at Goodison Park. Kelechi Iheanacho came on and gave Jamie Vardy a bit of help. And we know how good Vardy is, but you take away that space in behind him and he's not as effective. So I think this is the kind of game that they'll probably win, but I'm still not sure if Leicester are going to see this out. Are they going to get that top 4 finish? They could be the team that finishes 5th, and then if City get their ban overturned, they ultimately miss out. But yeah, this is a good game for them. I think Palace will probably just sit in and basically say to Leicester, here's the ball and see can you break us down. And the signs are from the other night at Goodison that Leicester probably should have enough that they could do it. Okay, so to wrap up, the headlines are Liverpool still have 100 points inside thanks to home comforts. United could give Liverpool and City a run for their money next season. Bruno Fernandes continuing to pull the strings for United. Arsenal no longer part
of the Wolf Pack. I think as my sub-editing advice to you, Phil, is go for WOLVE. It says WOLF here, so maybe you can edit that before Monday morning. And Leinster back on course to lock down Champions League place. Just before we let you go, Phil, Tottenham Hotspur last night, Jose Mourinho complaining about VAR. Of course, that is the big story this morning, and definitely not the case that Spurs are in a bit of bother. And despite having basically a full pre-season, Jose Mourinho hasn't exactly managed to steer the ship the way he wants to go.
No, and actually, funny enough, there was moments in the first half where I thought, you know what, if he can sort out his defence, there's serious potential, because obviously Birdvine's come in, and Son, Mora, Harry Kane, you've got Sissoko there. You've got players that can play really well on the counter-attack. So, unfortunately for Mourinho, and it's just something that you don't associate with the Mourinho of the past, is he's playing with a team that doesn't have a solid defence. And we saw that in the United game when they were 1-0 up, they couldn't see it out. And obviously, he's leaving Alderweireld on the bench instead of Dyer, and that's one that's the head-scratcher, because whatever about Vertonghen and Alderweireld playing as a partnership, I think Alderweireld's a much better option than Eric Dyer. Every day of the week, I'd be going for that. But I can understand Mourinho's frustration with VAR, by the way, but it's actually more the handball rule. It's an absolute ridiculous rule that Lucas Moura gets pushed over, a ball is kicked off, and he doesn't know anything about it, and the ref rules it out. But we saw the same with the Mahrez goal that was ruled out last night as well for Phil Foden's handball. It's a ridiculous law that was brought in. The only way you can counter it, it seems, is to put your arms in, tuck them into your jersey and not have them out. And then obviously you can't play football properly.
It's quite the week for VAR, all told. I mean, you're missing the fact that Jose Mourinho was a class act, Phil. The biggest event last night, where he like his big hug for Chris Wilder. I thought they were going to sort of get it on at one point. It was very intimate moment.
Who doesn't like Chris Wilder? Chris Wilder seems like one of the most popular managers in the Premier League. But it's classic Jose, obviously taken away from the fact that his side were beaten by a team that were in really poor form going into the game. Don't score many goals, and they went 3-0 up on Spurs, and not good. And we know Mourinho is all about the second season, but the reason Mourinho's at Tottenham is not because Tottenham is a job that really he wanted, but it was probably the only job that he could get in terms of a team at the time with a chance of getting Premier League or Champions League football. They were obviously still in the Champions League, but I think it's come a few years too late. And I think Daniel Levy loved the idea of being able to get Jose Mourinho, but I think, as I said, it's a few years too late.
Yeah, come on, Phil. Enjoy the football over the weekend.
Lads. Cheers.
Phil Egan there with the early headlines for you ahead of the weekend of football. We've lots to come. We've Shane Dowling is going to join us. He was forced to announce his retirement yesterday. He's going to join us a little bit later in the show to get stuck into what a tough decision that was. We're going to talk about the Armagh Mt Rushmore from Brian Baruti in Paisley. I mean, it's quite the county, so we'll see exactly from a sporting point of view. Tommy Makeup in there as well for good measure. What exactly? You're having that on.
It's as far as off-field tee-ups go for a county, that's right up there.
So that's coming a bit later on. We'll find out exactly who are the four sporting heads that need to go up on that Armagh Mt Rushmore, and we'll have the sports newspapers for you a little bit later than usual as well, coming up in about 20 minutes or so. It's 8:23 though on this Friday morning. Delighted to have you along with us. Do keep your comments coming into us. 0879 180 180, by the way, if you want to get in contact with us on WhatsApp this morning. So it is 8:23 on this Friday morning. Kieran Donaghy is going to join us next to chat about the latest in the GAA. But Eoin, you've been away. It's been a quiet couple of weeks, and here's what you've missed.
We're not intending to, we'd like people to call them out, but we're not actually intending to impose any penalties. That'd be fair to say, Tom?
Yeah, we haven't really looked at it in detail yet, Uachtaráin. I suppose today is about the fixtures programme, the calendar and what that might look like. The next step is looking at what safeguards that we put around that. The country as a whole and the association has showed a great degree of restraint and personal responsibility, and that's the thing that we'd like to rely on first and foremost before we get into it. Hasn't been a summer for penalties and for sanctions, and I'm not really sure that that's the right realm for this thing either. If there's a second stage required in terms of sanctions, rules, penalties and so on, of course we'll look at that, but that's not one for today.
I have heard all sorts, and from very good sources, of different counties and what's going on in counties. There's some county teams want their county players 4 nights a week to train for their intercounty football team, and the club is totally been left behind in that instance. And to get back to some sense of normality after this kind of unprecedented scenario we've been in, everybody just get back to your club. And you hear about people saying 98% of GAA players are club players. 100% of GAA players are club players.
But I'm starting with the inter-county managers, the inter-county boards for allowing it to happen. I'm also disillusioned with Croke Park for not coming up with stricter sanctions. And the players themselves, and the GPA in particular, for not standing up for the players and saying we're not accepting this. Because it's hypocrisy. Telling them to be dishonest and to be hypocritical is the right way to go about your business. I think it's disgraceful what's happening around the country, and I think it's high time that people in the GAA grew up and grew a pair of balls and called it out for what it is.
Absolutely. I'm a school principal, and I realised a long time ago, there's no point in having a sanction or having a rule if you don't have a sanction. Then the whole thing becomes a joke. And what has happened now is that we've got the worst of every world. We have the counties training in some places and the development of a club championship structure which has been squeezed so tight to ensure that it finishes quickly, that fellas can get back to training with the county team.
We'll say, I find you county players want to be at club training when club training's on. They do not want to be compromised. They don't want to be letting their club team down. And maybe at times, and I go back maybe in some type periods would involve Donegal, we compromised the players. I should have made a decision for those players. No, you are playing club games this evening. That's it. So it is, and you learn from it. They're letting their teammates down emotionally. It wasn't good for them, and then emotionally they were struggling with letting their own club teammates and community down as well. So you got to learn over time. Ger, I do think it's wrong to put all county managers in that. I know a lot of them are very reasonable. Put it this way: I know in Donegal at the minute, the boys I'm involved here. We live in Killybegs and Hugh McFadden and Owen Bann are up at club training. I know from talking to Racey and Fermanagh, Banty and Monaghan, the county players are all training with their clubs at the minute. So I think it's wrong to have this perception that county managers, number one, county managers are club people as well and enjoy going to club games. So it's not everybody's like that.
Yeah, President of the GAA, John Horan, Director General Tom Ryan, on why the GAA won't be punishing counties for breaking training rules, followed by reaction there from Michael Verney, Michael Dignan, Colm O'Rourke and Rory Gallagher speaking on OTB AM. So plenty happening over the course of the last week. We will get Kieran Donaghy's take in just a moment. Are you sticking with your three-word breakdown, Adrian, a total shambles?
It's been refreshing in so many ways that you've had the likes, like even listening to some of the clips there, the forthright, honest opinion that I think is has only been allowed to pour forth given the circumstances that we're in. Like, you listen to the comments of Rory Gallagher there, and he talks about maybe I made mistakes at Donegal. Like, it's high time we had those honesty of conversations, isn't it? Like, it feels like, maybe now is the opportunity to actually fundamentally do something about a culture in a sport that, I mentioned a bit earlier on that Westmeath Independent story and the fact the big discussion about the thermometers as to whether they have them or not. Have them. Anyway.
Kieran Donaghy, good morning.
Morning, how are you keeping?
Not too bad. So Colm O'Rourke there says the current situation we've got in the GAA is the worst of every world. Would you go along with that?
Look, it's not ideal, but it's an extremely difficult time to be involved in all this, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think certainly they've dropped the ball in a few areas, in regards to, in Basketball Ireland have done something similar where they've kind of put it back on the clubs and COVID officers, and you kind of look after your patch down there. I think there could have been a tiny bit more support, and from what I've heard from even when Dr. Tony Hoolan was always talking, temperature was a big thing, and maybe the GAA clubs could have been provided with a thermometer to check the players and club officials when they come in first thing crossing the gates of the club. And if anybody was over the 37.5 kind of mark, that they be automatically sent home, just to reduce the risk again. Whereas we are doing all the sanitising, we are doing all the filling out the COVID forms online, we are kind of getting in to training that way. But there could be there should have been probably more done to support clubs and support that first wave that's going back out onto the pitch, marking each other, because it's just the overall picture is probably being lost at times. Like, we're all delighted to be back playing football, but this COVID thing, as we've seen from RT Investigates, shows this is life and death in many ways for people. And I don't think the players, I think players are, hopefully will be fit enough to fight off a lot of it. But it's the people that, if they're infected on a pitch or on a training ground or in a game, and it's the people that they possibly go on and affect afterwards. And if somebody gets very sick or the ultimate worst case scenario, if someone died that you passed it on to, or you felt you passed it on to, that'd be quite hard to live with. So, I think there should have been more done to really try and be all over this as we were the first kind of almost guinea pigs back into action.
Right, because it does seem that there's two separate conversations here. There's one about the club versus the county player, and that's all fine. And then there's a separate conversation here about the safety of the players. And you seem to be of the opinion that more could be done for the club players who, let's not forget, are going to be the first people out there. Like, again, it's 100% of the organisation, of the playing part of the organisation, but they're going to be the first ones out there. And do you feel that perhaps, given the lack of thermometers in some counties, or the voting against mandatory use of thermometers, not everything's actually being done to protect the player?
Yeah, precisely. That's exactly my point. I can't understand why the thermometer thing isn't. They've always said like that. It's one of the, if you've any symptoms but your temperature is the automatic giveaway if your temperature is above a certain level. It's a warning sign in a way that you shouldn't be around people and you should probably be at home until that temperature starts to self out, or until you can find out if you have any more symptoms, or indeed if you get tested and find out that you have it or don't have it. Probably you should be staying away until them things are carried out. But yeah, just like, you just see with the Aussie rules, you obviously see with the professional teams, the way they're all going back and they're all being tested and they're getting tested, all these tests 10 times a week and all this kind of stuff. Same with the NBA starting over in the bubble now, where they're all living in a bubble and they're all kind of around their own people, and there's still people getting it. And I guess, we're all obviously amateurs, so we're all working daily lives. We're all trying to train. We've all got big fixtures coming up, so you're trying to make every training, and you're trying to make all these big games. And we've all played with we've all played with colds before, and we've all played with a bit of a flu when the game's big enough. And I just urge anybody to think of the bigger picture, that if you are feeling any symptoms, this isn't the time to be a kind of a hero or a martyr for the cause for the club and try and get through it and play, because ultimately you could have something that's not only very dangerous to your fellow players and your fellow club mates, but just to your pocket in society, and old people in your club, or old people in your family, or old people in your opposition's family, our club. So I think that's more, the whole club and county thing is its own debate. And, I think the GAA said, look, we're going to go with club first. I think it's two factors. I think they wanted to see how it went first. And secondly, then obviously to see if we could get more crowds into the bigger county games down the line. So I don't think technically they put the club first. I think they said, look, we'll try this, and if this works, then we might be able to get people in and revenue and such from games. So that's a whole other debate. But I think the health, when this boils down and the COVID boils down, it's all down to health and keeping people alive, and that's the most important thing. And I think that should be to the forefront of the GAA's. That should be the forefront of their focus, and it is. But I think they should be offering more support to people. I think, like us in Stacks, we paid for our own thermometer. I think we had a bit of a collection there training the last day, and it was got yesterday for the rest of the training. So I think, it's something that teams might have to do, but I think it should have been provided, really.
But players came together to actually chip in for your own, because you felt that you just feel safer going out on the pitch?
Yeah. We just felt that it was something that, I think it was put to the club to kind of get it. And, sure, clubs have very little lottos now. They're going to have a lot of resources now with all these games and physio bills and stuff like that coming up. So, we do a lot of that in Stacks. We got our own footballs there for the senior team recently as well. So yeah, look, I think they're about €100. So it's not a big deal. But I think there's 2,200 clubs in Ireland, so maybe 220 grand for the GAA to support every club in Ireland with a thermometer that'll be of a high level and a high spec. That will do the job right, and that every person that crosses the gates for training or games is tested, and anybody over it is sent home. I don't think it's rocket science, to be quite honest with you.
But what happens is that if you look at that Westmeath example that we've been quoting a couple of times this morning, the chairman steps in and he says, listen, we need to get thermometers because it's an extra layer of security and I'm highly recommending this. And suddenly there's a full-on debate about the rights and wrongs of having a thermometer. The Gary Castle delegate is saying that, you've said they cost €50. I think they cost €80. And why are we having this massive debate about this thing when, like you say, I mean, I don't think it's beyond any club to be able to go and foot a tiny bit like that. You talk about the player safety and the health of players being at the forefront. So the GAA have probably quite rightly gone on and said, listen, here's the recommendations around this. But there's been a fall off between that and specific guidance around stuff like temperatures. And ultimately it's coming down, Kieran, to individual player responsibility, where in a sport that culturally seems to be, maybe there's a bit of a deficit in terms of that. Like you said, players have got a bit of an injury or a flu, or they're going to play through that, and maybe they're applying the same rules here. But fundamentally, that the clear guidance, and it's not too late, right? Like GAA can step in anytime they want. That clear guidance has been maybe the one thing that's really been lacking from this entire thing.
Yeah, I think they probably need to step in on a few fronts, to be honest with you. I think it's kind of time to bite the bullet for the GAA. This is a big issue in the world right now. And I think when they kind of go down the line of both sides, the club versus county row, you could very easily come in and say, look, if anybody's on the field actually training with their counties before September 14th, there's fines or there's whatever punishments can be given out, because as Mike Quirk's article rightly said, if you're driving up and down the N7 every day, if there's no punishment for going 180 kilometres an hour, sure, and you're in a rush, then why wouldn't you go that speed? But as Michal rightly said, he clocks it at 120 because there's fines and there's penalty points, and he doesn't want that in his record. And that's the way it probably should be in the GAA. There should be some kind of punishment. So I think they could step in there, but I think they could also say that physical training maybe is not acceptable to September 14th, but maybe meeting, because, I had an interesting chat with a person there recently that was involved in high-level sport in France, and they were saying that their training zones were between either 1 and 2, which is at the bottom, or 9 and 10 when it comes to intensity. They never worked between 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. That was just an area they felt was a waste of time. So basically they would do a lot of walkthroughs, or else they'd be going flat out. That was the two kind of parameters of the way they trained. And I think there could have been certain things looked at there, but I think county teams should be able to meet and should be able to talk and out in the pitch about maybe things that they want to work in, or just do walkthroughs where fellas could do it on top of the club training. And like Mike is doing above and leash, talking to the clubs about recovery and how to have their players in the best shape possible, and giving them all the insight and high-level professionalism that is in the county scene now, and passing that down to the club level to all of them, so they can try and have his best players in the best shape coming back. But obviously that if teams are getting knocked out and players are getting knocked out, of course they can come back into the county training and do individual training with the teams, or indeed as. So I think they could definitely come out and tidy that up, and I think they could also tidy the other thing up.
Kieran, can I ask you, just this and almost all of these topics, the fixture list and everything, come back to one person, two people in every county, the county managers, and the heavy-handed influence, too much influence Michael Duggan spoke about during the week that they have. Would you agree that that's fundamentally the most significant issue in each of those counties, the influence of the county manager, and what can be done about it?
Well, it's hard to know really, because sometimes it might be the county manager, but it could also be the county chairman. You don't know where the chairman's loyalties lie with this. We've seen certain people come out and back the club very much, but that'd be the popular thing to do now. But I think if people really wanted their county team to succeed and do well, and they were to come out and say it, I think they get a lot of ridicule for it. So it's fine to come out and support the club game, but and that's just a viewpoint people have when they hear these guys speak. But of course, county managers have too much control in some places, and then there's possibly places where they don't have enough control. So it shouldn't be on that, and that's the ultimate point here. This should have been a very clear directive sent down from the top. we know who the bosses are in the GAA, and that shouldn't have been left up to any one person to paddle their own boat or fix their own things. It should have been a bit more probably strong-handed by the GAA, just purely on the point of safety. Like for years, I put my grandmother to bed when she was old because my mom couldn't lift her in, so we used to take turns and go in. But like in the current circumstances, I'd be in a very tricky position there, with an 85-year-old woman who isn't the best of health, and I'm, spending 25 minutes with her to get her changed and get her into bed and stuff. I'd be in a very tricky position if my grandmother was alive, God rest her soul, on that basis only. So, when you see people like Jack McCaffrey that are working in hospitals that are stepping out, and I'm sure there's plenty of others too, maybe not as high profile, there's a clear reason for this because there's worry there, and players want to play. Of course, we want to represent our clubs. Of course, we want to give something to the community. We've been ravaged by misery and sorrow over the last 4 months, and I think people want to try and lift the spirits of people, and I think people are desperate to give a yahoo at a ref or a yahoo at a player in a game, and to get that pent up energy that's built up over these last 4 or 5 months off their chest. These people are used to going to games every weekend. So we are, of course, want to bring that side to it, but we should be bringing that side to it with also the backing of knowing that as much as possible within reason is being provided by the organisation to make sure that all its members are safely looked after.
Just on the club versus county thing again, Kieran, like I think with the lack of an actual sanction, I think that will create widespread paranoia, if nothing else, and that may lead to counties coming back training earlier because they believe that their neighbour next door has been back earlier than them training. And like the headline on that Mike Quirk piece is, "You've proof of county training, then grow a pair," he quotes, and call it out. Like the thing you'd be closest to is the Kerry team. Have the Kerry team been back training?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'm pretty sure that they are thinking about getting back, meeting up, like trying to have these meetings, like as in walkthroughs. I'm pretty sure that I don't think club managers would have an issue with it either. I think it's more tactical. I think the county managers have to place a lot of trust in the clubs now to get their players fit, right, and healthy. But it is a lot to try and, like, the intricacies of the modern game now, the tactical evolution of the game, where you've set plays from throw-ins, you've set plays from kickouts, you've set plays from sideline balls, you've defensive structures, you've offensive structures, against the blanket. You've so much to do, and really, when September 14 comes, they'll want to be seeing who's playing well. They'll want to be seeing who's in form. This is do or die stuff when it does start up. So, and I know it's 2 league games at the start, but there's a lot of teams that are placing massive value in the league or in very tricky positions in the league and want to survive or get promoted to play in certain championships next year, etc. So it's going to be very serious when it kicks off. So, and that's where I think the GAA need to step in here and say, look, okay, lads, we've heard bits and pieces of people training. There's no way there's trainings to happen while there's county championships going on. Players will only train with their clubs, but you are allowed to meet up. And, if people are training hard with their clubs and a county manager gets them in on a Tuesday on a night and a Saturday morning to do walkthroughs and do tactical sessions, well, if he's going to run them around the place on top of all the training they're doing with the club, that isn't overly intelligent either. So I don't see them doing that. But I think it's the contact. I think it's getting little things that they want to bring into their game through to their players. And I think that kind of 4 or 5 week period they have to get ready for October 17th is pretty tight to do a lot of that, considering the championships are going to be going on to the 11th of October. So in Kerry, you've the likes of David Clifford within East Kerry, been involved with East Kerry to the 11th of October. He's going to be a fairly busy man if he's trying to do every training with the club and every training with the county and every meeting and every video session. He's going to be quite a busy man up until the 11th of October if they do go back to another county final and try and retain their crown. So that's a lot on players too. And I think David would be much happier if he said, look, instead of having a manic 3 or 4 weeks where you're gone every night and you're trying to do things with club and county, that he could get little bits in now with the club and walkthrough, or with the county and walkthroughs, and then go back in and do all his physical training with the club.
like, I think you were making the point actually yesterday morning, Adrian. Like, nobody will mind in this current scenario if people change their mind. So Kieran, could the GAA come out today and say this is actually the punishment we think is fair after listening to what the country has been saying over the last week? We've actually decided that there should be a punishment. Do you think that would be a fair thing to do? And also, what do you think that punishment should be?
I would certainly would have no issue with the GAA coming out reaffirming their stance on this, because we've seen with this disease constantly since the start that things evolve an awful lot in 2 or 3 weeks, and this was kind of announced 2 weeks ago. So, there's no harm coming out and saying, look, there's been some uplift in cases within communities, and we're going to tighten everything up. Every club must have a thermometer. We're going to provide it. When you go back to tighten up all that kind of side of it, and then also readdress the club versus county issue and say, we're aware of county teams training and pulling players from the clubs, and we're going to lay heavy fines on anybody that does that. So that can be cut out right now. Players should be only training with their clubs, but we will allow walkthroughs with the county teams, or we will allow tactical sessions or whatever. And as I said, if the clubs know they're getting all their players and they're training hard Tuesday, Friday and Sunday, I don't think the county team can expect to do another full session or two on top of that. So it'd be madness for them to be training anyway, because their players can't do 5 or 6 nights in a row. So, but I think county managers would be quite happy to sit down and go through a lot of these things, that when they do get out onto the pitch and when it is okay and safe for them, everybody to get back training and everybody's on a level playing field, then you can start ramping up your preparation and your thing. But you can do it in a much quicker manner, because you can say, okay, lads, remember the kick out that we walked through a week ago? We'll have a quick look at it here on the board, and you go straight in and do it. You don't have to explain it all again on the board, which takes a few minutes off your training session. You've already a lot of the explanations done. I think you can do a lot through Zoom now. So the county players would train with their clubs and maybe have 2 or 3 Zoom sessions a week, whether they wanted to do a bit of strength and conditioning just to build a bit of camaraderie, or whether they wanted to keep it very simple and just go through stuff that they've struggled with the year before, or that they struggled with in the early part of the league, and do very good tactical analysis. The tactical analysis done by inter-county setups now is brilliant. So I think getting fellas to sit down and watch that for 40 minutes, 2 or 3 nights, or maybe 2 nights a week on top of the club training wouldn't be too much to ask of fellas. They don't have to travel anymore, but they are getting messages from the manager, and you can keep fellas on their toes and almost do it like a lecture and pop quiz fellas to make sure fellas aren't at home falling asleep watching Home and Away while the meeting's happening or anything, you know what I mean? So it's some fellas in meetings like that in Zoom can sometimes maybe zone out if they're not being, if it isn't interactive. But interactive is hard. We do a lot of it here at work with Zoom calls. We did a lot of signing of contracts through Zoom during the COVID epidemic. And what you'd have is everybody be talking at different times, and it would be hard to pick certain people up. So maybe something with having back Zooms meeting, maybe you do a middle 8 Zoom meeting, maybe you do a forward Zoom meeting, certain ways that they defend certain scenarios. But there's loads can be done on that front, that you can have your team as well prepared as you can, that when you do get them back in September 14th. But here's the issue. When you get them back in September 14th for the county manager, you may have a lot of your guys still involved in county championship semi-finals, finals, quarterfinals. So you still don't have them when you're doing your sessions. So I think the GAA need to come out and cover off both senses of change, both when it comes to the health around the COVID and the checking with the temperature gauges or whatever other means they can bring in to help us to be safe as players. That, as I said earlier on, if I was going home putting my grandmother to bed tonight, that I would know that she'd be safe and she'd be okay. And right now, could I put my hand on my heart and say I know that when I'm coming out of a training session? I don't. We've got a certain few guys in Dublin that come down from work and training on Friday and Sundays. Do I know, are they fully being hygienic throughout the week? Are they wearing masks? Are they putting on gloves? Are they sanitizing? We hope so, and we tell each other that we should do this, but I can't. It's impossible to put that on a manager or a COVID officer in a club, a person who's done an online course for 5 or 6 minutes. It's very hard to put that on them. Yeah. And if a breakout happens within a club and somebody, loses a parent or a grandparent, this COVID officer has an awful lot of, weight on his shoulders and all this. And I just think that they should be supported to say, well, at least, look, I've done the checks. I did my temperature gauges. I didn't see a spike in his temperature. So maybe the case, it arrived when he wasn't here, or he didn't have it when he was here last Tuesday, that he got it that Wednesday when he went home. Or I'm just trying to put myself in that person's shoes, that if people start getting it in the club, and you're also thinking about the player, you know, and you'd hope they'd be responsible enough to make the brave and right decision. But you've got the guy the night before the county final that's coughing and that has pains in his chest and his temperature's up around 35, and he's never played in a county final before, and his whole family are getting ready for it on October 11th, and you'd hope that he makes the brave call and rings his manager and says, I've got symptoms, I don't feel good, I won't be there. But that's not easy for guys
we
to
shouldn't
do
just
that.
hope is the thing, isn't it? Like, there's got to be something else. And there's a fall off. I know we keep referring to that Westmeath example, but like, there is a fall off in the understanding of this thing. Like, I mean, they were having a debate about how many people would have to come in contact with the thermometer. It's not a thermometer
no, this is one you put up to the forehead, Adrian.
People who have kids will be very familiar with them. They're little sort of things that you hold in front of the forehead. So what I'm saying is that there's a fall off of understanding that we've been asking the off the ball viewers about sort of, you know, if there's a breach of that guideline, that 14 September guideline for return to collective training, should teams be thrown out of the championship, and nearly 70% feel that kick them out with the guts of 1,000 votes there. So that's the way people are thinking. Just one on the GPA, Kieran, they're obviously very concerned. They've had their statement during the week, very concerned about the narrative, this nasty narrative that's cropped up about pitting club versus county. It's really getting them down, that narrative. What are your thoughts about the GPA's role in this and trying to bring some sort of a solution to it? And how far they've gone or not, I suppose.
Oh, we've just lost.
As I said, it's constant.
Oh, sorry. Go on, Kieran.
Sorry, did you lose me?
You're back.
Sorry,
no, you're back.
Call me there. It's a very hard one, as I said, for all involved to get every statement 100% right, because there's so many different viewpoints, there's so many opinions on this. But you know, the GPA, as much as they do, they're not the bosses, they're not the head honchos. We know who the bosses are, we know who the head honchos are in the GAA world, and they had to I think they had to take the lead on this maybe a bit stronger from the get-go. And I don't really like the narrative of, you know, I don't like this constant opinion of this really bitter kind of club versus county narrative. We all want our clubs to do well. We all want our counties to do well. That's where we all come together and go up to Dublin on these very memorable days to support our county team. And, you know, I don't think players or people involved with county teams, you know, should be feeling like the general community in their area are constantly giving out. So it's a very tricky one to kind of get right. But look, I think the ultimate thing here around club and county is there needs to be more direction. There needs to be a firmer, a more direct narrative around this, and it had to come from the top down. And I think everybody the GPA would roll in behind that, the players would roll in behind that. But when it's left very airy-fairy as it is now, and you know, there's no sanctions, lads, but you can't train until September 14th. So that makes as much sense as I don't know what. Like that's like the threats that I make to my daughter Lola Rose every day. If she doesn't eat her dinner, she's not going to get her jelly baby afterwards. She always gets her jelly baby whether she eats the dinner or not. So it's like a kind of it's these empty threats that anybody as a parent in this modern day knows. When I was young, and my father said to do something, there wasn't an empty threat coming, and it was done fairly rapid and fairly lively. But now, when I issue these big threats to Lola Rose and Indy when they're not doing what I want them to do, they look through me, maybe like some of the county teams are looking through the GAA now and kind of going, well, you're not going to do anything to me anyway, so we're going to fire on. So that's something that needs to be addressed. And as I said, there is no issue with the GAA. We're a great organisation, but we are an amateur organisation. We aren't like the NBA bubbles and the premierships and all the tests, and that's not possible. But they still could have maybe need to come out and be firmer, and come out and be firmer fast. Don't let this thing evolve to where more players are getting it, more clusters are breaking, you know, or a cluster breaks out within a club or a community. Maybe come out and just get firmer with it now. And look, to be honest, it's as I said, it's a constantly evolving situation. You know, if you said to me 6-7 weeks ago, I was kind of saying there'd be no football. You know, I really thought there'd be no sport the way it was going, and then it kind of turned quickly. So it is constantly evolving. So it wouldn't like they'd be you know, reacting to this and having to come out and do something. They could. It's very perceivable that things have changed over the last few weeks and things have been brought to their attention, and they're upping the sanctions, or they're changing the statement, or they're upping the demand that they're putting on that statement with, as I said earlier on, with maybe some threat behind it. And but look, it's also very hard to monitor, and the GAA know that. People are very good at being secret around the place now, but you know, I think there is onus. I think there is some onus as well on county managers that are doing this, obviously, to come out and stop doing it, and to reevaluate the position that they're putting their players in, and maybe think, as Mike Quirk has done in Laois, and I'm sure there's others have done similar, better ways around this for everybody involved.
Kieran Donaghy, great stuff. Thanks a million for taking the call.
No hassle, boys. We'll talk to you later.
Chat to you soon. So just to clarify, we've asked the GAA for clarity around their stance on clubs around the country using thermometers for temperature checks. All right, time for the sports pages.
OTB AM.
We'll start with OTBsports.com. The lead here is John Giles on Liverpool. Klopp has built the foundations of a dynasty, he says. Giles on Dyche, meanwhile, says he should be in the running for Manager of the Year, amid reports that he could be let go by the club. Meanwhile, Nike withdraw new Barcelona jersey from sale because of sweat. Armagh's Mt Rushmore, there's a preview article if you want to whet the appetite for Armagh's Mt Rushmore, which is coming your way in about 15 minutes' time. So that's OTBsports.com this morning.
The Irish Examiner for you on this Friday morning. City follow show of respect with statement of intent from the Etihad there. Nick Callow, and also reflections on the other game. Mourinho fumes as Spurs wilt in the wake of controversial call. John Fallon has a story about the relegation format backlash, delaying League of Ireland restart plans. FAI could be tested legally, he says, after their board ratified the new promotion relegation format for the shortened season, which is essentially 9 of the 10 Premier Division teams wanting just one team to be relegated, scrapped the playoff for the second from bottom team and the second from top, of course, in the first division. We'll see how that plays out. And OTB AM is in the headlines out on the right-hand side there, with Simon Lewis writing up Éamna Falvey's comments on Keith Wood's State of the Union show on the show yesterday, where the World Rugby Chief Medical Officer spoke about the difficulties that upright tackling in certain areas of the scrum will pose in relation to COVID.
The Irish Independent this morning leads with a photograph of Raheem Sterling putting the ball into the back of the net, really, but via Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. Klopp dismisses questions of attitude as battle lines are drawn for next season, is the headline there, as Liverpool let guard down. And FAI confident clubs won't derail plan for League of Ireland return, writes Aidan Fitzmaurice.
Times Ireland for you this morning. It's a fairly bizarre stuff in relation to the English Football League. The main story here by Matt Lawton, with the chairman of the EFL, discussing a rumour about the change of ownership at Wigan with a fan who was posing, with the person who was a fan who bumped him outside his house on the way home, and the guy took out a video. Shot the feet of the EFL chairman and engaged him in a conversation about speculation and rumour about the change of ownership at Wigan. It's all very bizarre. Matt Lawton writes it up there, and we'll see how that plays out over the next while. Good shot of Raheem Sterling as well from the Etihad last night. Martin Ziegler and Declan Warrington write about West Ham defaulting on £5.5 million of payment for the striker Sebastian Haller to Eintracht Frankfurt. And Elizabeth Amon tells us that the England versus West Indies series, due to start next week, might be in jeopardy as England's Sam Curran has been tested for COVID. England have a self-described biosecure bubble since meeting up last week, but Curran has sickness and the trots, we're told. So if his test today for COVID comes back positive, the whole thing could be off.
The Irish Times goes with out-of-sorts champions dismantled by smarting City. Sheffield show steel as they sink sorry Spurs. And Murray Hannigan writes, fireworks off the pitch as Liverpool's defence seems drunken success.
The Irish Daily Star, Kieran Cunningham and Shane Dowling's premature retirement, bowing out, of course, after 3 years of battling that knee injury. We're going to talk to Shane on the show a little bit later on. Club's anger at League of Ireland format there as well. And from Mark McCadden, and the hangover is the main splash. City 4, Liverpool 0. Klopp holds hands up as champs crushed.
The Mirror then goes with it's the hangover 4. Guard of Honour, then City give champs a real headache with painful defeat. You've got Lewis Hamilton driven by defeating racism and the pandemic. Rebel clubs drop debate on restart. And Jose says the ref had a bad day at the office. That is the Irish Daily Mirror.
And the Irish Sun, Ra Venge. Sterling makes Gomez pay for canteen scrap, and VAR VAR from Happy, VAR from Happy, as the report from Spurs lost to Sheffield United there. Jason Byrne on Dowling's retirement and Owen Cowser on the League of Ireland as well. That's his son.
The Irish Daily Mail, blue murder, champs to chumps as Liverpool crushed by City onslaught. Civil war looms as FAI ratify league restart, writes Philip Quinn. And Taylor frustrated as biggest fight in women's boxing history is floored. That is the Irish Daily Mail.
And The Guardian, crash landing, champions handed a beating by brilliant City, and Black Lives Matter fuels my hunger for titles, says Lewis Hamilton. He's the only black driver in F1, and saying that the ongoing movement and his outspokenness about the entire matter is driving him to clinch yet another title.
Daily Telegraph, meanwhile, leads with a photograph of Raheem Sterling. Champs to chumps, City run riot against league winners. Mourinho says VAR will turn fans off football, and MPs investigate lack of black leaders at top of sports bodies.
The Racing Post, the chances of the Frankie Dettori Mount English King and the unfavourable Stall 1 draw as the main story here for the Epsom Classic this weekend. No horses won it apparently from that stall this century, writes David Kerr. That's the Racing Post.
The Herald then. Blues slam champions. City teach flat Liverpool football lesson at Etihad, and FAI hope to avoid a legal challenge, while Richard Dunn is writing about how Reds compare to the great teams.
The last one from me is from the Irish News. Paddy Talley, the Dow manager, delays to voice his criticism of the GAA. Paul Keane writing that Talley's in favour of a national, was in favour of a national open draw rather than the provincials. Felt there was an opportunity to do something a bit more radical. That is a missed opportunity, he says, from the GAA.
Finally then, the OTB Sports app this morning. You can download the brand new app. You just have to search for OTB Sports in the App Store or on the Google Play Store. It opens up on your home feed, as you can see right there, all the news. And you can go to the radio tab right there, where you can listen to OTB AM or OTB Sports Radio all day long. In fact, it's our sports radio station. In the video feed, then you can watch the show live, see our latest clips, and then you've got the OTB Podcast Network, as you can see there. So search for that in the Google Play Store or on the App Store if you're using an iPhone. Right, Shane Dowling is with us, the now former Limerick footballer. An early retirement. Shane, you're very welcome to the show. How are things?
Yeah, good morning. How are you?
Not too bad. It feels strange, I must say, saying that, former Limerick hurler. I can imagine it's been an extremely weird week for you emotionally over the last few days.
Yeah, and I think you're the first person to put it to me like that, so thanks for that. Yeah, it's been, listen, yesterday was quite mad, and it wasn't as bad as I expected in terms of how I thought I was going to feel, but because the previous 2 weeks were extremely difficult, and you know, I a lot of the emotional side of it was gotten out of the way by that stage, you know. So yeah, it's been very difficult. I'm not going to lie, but you know, what can you do? It's part of life, isn't it? And as I said, I'm being very fortunate to be part of the Limerick team for so long, and you know, I got to achieve what I wanted, and at the end of the day, that's the bottom line for me. Of course, I wanted to go on for a couple of years, but you know, I nailed down what I always wanted to get, really.
So what has been the timeline of events here, Shane, from realising that you had to hang up the boots to telling all the interested parties that now was the time for you to walk away?
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago, Wednesday 2 weeks ago, I went down to get a small procedure, a scope on my knee, just to remove some loose bodies. And to my mind, I was going to go down, get them taken out, close up, and I thought I was going to be back running this week or the weekend or whatever, you know. But when he went in, you know, there was more damage and more defect in the cartilage, and you know, it's in the same knee for the last couple of years, and the cartilage is just diseased, as he put it, basically. And you know, it's just never ending, really.
When did these issues first start, Shane?
I first got injured in the county final of October 2017 in the Piershig, and I returned at half-time of the Schlockneil game in the All-Ireland Club semi-final in 2018. Albeit probably came back too early, but obviously that was a very important game, so I came on, even as I said, I probably shouldn't have had. And yeah, so from February 2018 to August 2019. You know, I was having pain on and off. It didn't go or anything like that. You know, I was able to play away with it. And then in August of last year, we say after the All-Ireland semi-final versus Kilkenny, I was playing a club match, and literally I was doing nothing because I was marking Declan Hannon at the same day, and I just remember saying, I said, "Geez, something got on my knee." He's you didn't move, or you didn't really, probably didn't move at all, he would say, but you know, he said, you know, I didn't twist, I didn't do anything mad on it, like, you know. So I tried to run it off, and I could actually feel something moving in my knee. So I said, no, there's something not right. So then I got an MRI, and it showed up that, you know, I had another osteochondral defect in my knee, is what it's called, you know. And so I got the procedure done last September. Spent 3 months on crutches, and since then, you know, it's been aggravating me and at me, and I've done everything, and so then, as I said, I about maybe 6 or 8 weeks ago, I went down and got another MRI because I couldn't continue the way I was going. Mentally, it was getting the better of me because it was too sore. I knew there was something wrong, and obviously with COVID, you know, I was extremely lucky that Tiger Sullivan got me in quick and done another MRI on me, and he spotted a loose body in my knee, but he said that the procedure that I got done in September was perfect. So I was happy with that because I thought, you know, scope is 2 weeks recovery time. So then I got the procedure 2 weeks ago, and that's when obviously we spotted the further damage.
Right. So even though this has been something that's been at you for quite some time, it really does feel like the severity of it has only come into view very recently.
Yeah. No. You know, I went down to I spoke to one particular man in February, and he wanted to put me in a coffin and close me up, and I refused to do that because, you know, I said, you know, I have to look at every angle possible. So since then, I suppose it has been in the back of my mind that, you know, things mightn't come right here, but I was going to give myself every opportunity, and I did. You know, I rest easy knowing that I can't do any more. I've done everything. I've done the rehab. I've done everything, but unfortunately, there's just something mechanically wrong.
And is it a conversation at all, Shane? Is it a situation where the doctor says, if you do this, you will have long-term implications in terms of your mobility in that leg, or is it fairly clear-cut where it's like you can't possibly get to the high-octane level of being an inter-county hurler again, given the current condition of the knee? Yeah, so like, as he said to me, you know, afterwards that day, he came down and spoke to me, and he said, "Listen, your goal coming down here today was that you wanted to be able to leave here and walk properly. You wanted to be able to play a game of golf. You know, you wanted to be able to live life normally." And he said, "We've achieved that because," he said, "I've removed the loose bodies from your knee and I've cleaned out your knee." He said, "To be honest, I actually can't understand how you have gone on for so long with them loose bodies in your knee. If you're feeling them symptoms for the last couple of months," he said, "they're obviously there for the last couple of months." But I suppose I was so blinkered in terms that I thought the rehab was going to work, you know. So he just said, "Listen, you know that," he said, I currently have a hole in my knee. I have a hole in the cartilage. So I have two decisions. One, I leave it as it is, and it won't affect my day to day. It shouldn't affect my day to day. Or two is I get another procedure where, as I said, it's crutches for 3 months and rehab for 9 months, or another 6 months, be 9 months in total, and then. But by the time that comes around, I could have another defect in my knee because the cartilage all around the side of it is all diseased as well. Right. So talk us through the process then after the reality hits home, Shane. Like about the last 2 weeks, who's the first person that you tell? Because like I'd imagine initially it's hard to sink in that the inter-county career has now been taken away from you.
Yeah, listen, I know I was going to be under big pressure without coming to a decision. This is obviously a huge decision in my life. I wasn't going to just come home Wednesday evening and say it's all over and off I go. Like, you know, I obviously thought about it, spoke to people, and I did. And I spoke to different professionals, and I spoke to friends, and I spoke to myself. That was a big conversation to have with myself. You know, that's important as well. And I knew last week, and I said, listen, it was affecting me because, you know, I was lying to everybody, telling them that I was coming right. And then the club championship starting back up, people were asking, you know, would I be playing a part in that? And I knew I wasn't going to be, and it was affecting me. So then I said, listen, the inevitable is the inevitable, so why delay it? And so then last Wednesday, I texted John Kiley to me for a cup of tea, and he came into the house, and we just sat down and had a chat. And like, while I knew what was going to happen, or what I was going to say, he wasn't shocked. He had a fair idea what he was coming in for. And but I suppose when he left, you know, he's the boss man, he's the banished door, and that really put the nail in the coffin for me, obviously.
What did he say?
He said it doesn't sit well with him. It's very upsetting that a 27-year-old has to do this. I know John for a long time. I've worked with him for a long time. So yeah, he was upset without a shadow of a doubt. But what can you do?
When you say you're having conversations with yourself before that point, how do those conversations go?
They're tough, because I suppose what you start doing then is you start thinking back of everything down through the years since you were a young kid, and all the hurling that you've done and the lads that you've met and the memories that you've created, and that's quite sad. Thinking back of something that you love and it being taken away from you. It's they're very, very difficult. They're very difficult.
Yeah. Well, in relation to that self-talk that you were talking about, Shane, was it like? It sounds like there might have been a part of you that you were almost trying to convince yourself on some level that maybe it wasn't over.
Well, one thing I'd like to think I am in life is a realist. I don't like to think stuff that's not possible or anything like that, or say stuff that I know isn't going to be possible. I just literally said, right, look at the different options. What am I going to be able to do here? It didn't take that long, and I just said, listen, and I was able to get the surgeon took pictures in my knee when the camera was in there, and I took them pictures away with me, and the 4 loose bodies, the 4 loose pieces of cartilage in a container, they were all in the package for me to bring home. So as I was making the decision, I was just looking at them and saying, look, well, I have a big hole in my ear first of all, so and I have to get an operation if I want to try play number 2, and that operation, as I said, takes a long time, but the risk of it going again is extremely high.
Yeah, that's a pretty real thing to have in your hand, very tangible thing to have in your hand. What you mentioned a bit earlier on about the Schlock-Neil game, particularly the semi-final, and maybe you said that maybe you'd come back a bit too early. Have you any sense or regret about that sort of stuff, or a sense of the impact that has possibly had in terms of rushing back a recovery?
No, definitely not. I don't. I wouldn't change it for the world, to be honest, because I got an All-Ireland club medal out of it that year. So,
do you think it negatively impacted on your knee?
Sorry, I didn't get a club medal. That's the year we lost it. Sorry. No, it didn't. No, we didn't. I don't think it made an impact. I don't. No, I think my knee, my cartilage is diseased, and that's the bottom line. I don't think it would have made. If the hole was in the same area where he'd already repaired, I'd say possibly. But where he is repaired in the last 2 occasions have come back perfectly fine.
Okay.
I remember, Shane, you speaking after 2018 about how overcome with emotion you were when you saw how happy your parents were after you won the All-Ireland. I'd imagine even beyond John Kiley, those sort of personal conversations have been another level of tough over the last couple of weeks. How has that been for you, speaking to your parents and telling them about that?
Yeah, so spoke to John on Friday, and we said, listen, I wanted to tell a number of people, and I didn't want it getting out before yesterday, because I wanted to make sure that I was able to tell everybody that I wanted to speak to individually and everything, that I wanted to give them the respect that they deserve. And so I had to say it to a number of different people, and obviously my parents being the most important. I called over to them Saturday with the intention of doing it. I didn't. I wasn't able to. The exact same happened on Sunday. And I said to myself on Monday, listen, I have to, and what was happening then is I was telling a couple of other people, and I said, if they hear it through someone else, that's going to be a very, very poor reflection on me. So, I had to stand up to it. They're my parents, and they've been the people who've led me in the direction that I'm in. And so, yeah, I met them on Monday, and I suppose the attitude I had was I was going to go in and say, listen, I'm going to pack it in, it's all over, I don't care, and sure, listen, we'll all plough on, and makes no difference. As in, I wanted to play it down completely, so that they kind of, and I literally went in, and even before I had a word spoke, I broke down. So I think I actually frightened them. I think they thought there was something seriously wrong, but anyway.
Yeah, and I presume that that's obviously tied up with the amazing moments that you've had in terms of the success and the level of achievement that you've had, and the investment that they've had in you. I can only imagine what it must be like to having been on that journey, because you mentioned it in your statement, and you've mentioned it here this morning in terms of that journey that you were on, and I can only imagine the investment that they've had in you. I'm assuming that that's the difficult part of having that specific conversation.
Yeah, and listen, they've put up with a lot down through the years. I'm a moody man when hurling doesn't go well or when I don't go well, and they've had to look at me and listen to me for long enough when during the difficult times. I mean, obviously in the last couple of years things have been great. We've won a bit and it's been easy for everybody, but for them, you know, when I was obviously, you know, living at home up until 2 years ago, you know, they had to put up with a lot, and that's why. Listen, they're the most. Them and your close friends and family and everything. They're your most important people, and that's why, because they see how you are during the difficult times when nobody else does. Yeah. So, but I suppose, listen, I want to ensure that this doesn't become about my knee injury. Yeah, it's very, very difficult. It's very sad, and I'm genuinely heartbroken. I'm not going to say otherwise, but I'm extremely lucky to have the career that I've had, to be playing with the people that I've played with, and to win what I've won. Because, like, you know, I'm literally just a guy that wanted to play hurling and to try reach, you know, something where nobody else got, and I'm so fortunate that I happen to do that.
Yeah, I'm sure your parents, like, they just want the best for you as well, right? Like, they actually don't really, when you come back and you deliver that news and everybody gets over the shock of it, they just want you to be happy and well.
They do. Listen, that's and you've hit the nail on the head. It's that simple. You know, it's sad for them. It's sad for everybody. That goes without saying. But it's far from trouble. It's far from trouble. I spoke to, you know, different people over the last couple of days who have faced real trouble in their lives, and, you know, that really put into perspective for me. And listen, obviously I'll be fine and they'll be fine. And as you said, once I'm okay, they'll be okay, and I'll certainly be okay. And no doubt about that.
We've had a comment in here from Aaron. He says, lads, please thank Shane from everyone in Limerick. What a legend he has been for us. So many great days in green. And as you say, I mean, not many people get their hands on an All-Ireland medal, and that's been achieved in terms of achieving everything you possibly could have. That's the big box ticked. And, like, you start to wonder then, and personally I wonder, like, what is next for you, Shane? Like, on the first level, what happens next in terms of your own health with that knee? Is there going to be a process of physiotherapy on that to ensure that it doesn't give you bother down the line, or how are things going to work?
Yeah, so what's next is even difficult to answer, because right. I suppose right now, as I said, I have a hole in my knee, so over time that actually forms with fake cartilage. Very complicated, no need to go into it, but that will kind of form, that hole will fill over, but that will fill over if you give it time and if you don't go pounding at it, you know what I mean? So like that's the first thing. And I suppose I should be able to go back jogging in a couple of weeks' time. And I know it sounds quite dramatic that, you know, you're holding your knee and you want to go back jogging. Like, these holes are probably really, really small in the greater scheme of things, you know. But I hope to be able to go back jogging. And, like, I don't know, is a club campaign possible or not for me? I don't have the answers for that. I'd love to think it is. That really upsets me. I mean, the reality is everyone's going to come and go from Limerick. Everyone's time comes to finish with Limerick at some stage. Everyone knows that. But, like, as I said, I'm a 27-year-old lad that, you know, grew up beside the Piercing and is obsessed with the Piercing and the people that are there. And, like, I don't care what I've won with the Piercing, you know, or what people might think I've won, and that doesn't bother me. I just want to go down and play hurling and be competitive and do what I've always done in my life. And, like, I don't even know if that's possible. But listen, we'll give it every chance. I'm not under any time pressure with my club. If it's not this year, so be it. It could be next year. Who knows?
Yeah. It just struck me, and we'll have you in at some point, Shane, and have a proper sort of debrief on the career. It's probably not really the day for it today, but it did strike me that I was just thinking about it last night. Joe Canning often talks about that sort of, like, that monster score in his first senior game, the Galway, one of his first senior games for Galway anyway, and how it was used for a lifetime to hammer him, because he wasn't scoring 212 every game. And you came into the senior setup with, like, an unbelievable reputation, obviously, from underage. Did you find that you thrived off that, or did the pressure weigh on you, or how did you find you dealt with that reputation coming in?
Well, it didn't bother me, because I came in and I didn't feel under any pressure, because you're like, you get away with it for a couple of years. If you're 18 or 19 years of age, you come into a senior panel. If you don't play well, you're a young flash, or you give him time, he'll develop. And if you do play well, it's a bonus. You know, and at the time, I suppose, you know, Limerick weren't where they were now, or where they are now. So I never felt, and you know, there were some fantastic people around me. Like Brian Geary was still playing, Dodge was still playing. You know, and then obviously there was a lot of others, but them being the two elder of who was there and who I would have looked up to playing growing up. And they were extremely good to me. And, you know, I'd love to think that I was like that with the younger lads that came in recent years. But I never felt pressure going in there. I always enjoyed it, and I was surrounded by great people and great management and a great county board. And I just remember the memories that I had. And so I suppose growing up, listen, the fact that we were winning Hearty Cups and the club was going well and all that. No, I always enjoyed it. I never felt the pressure of that, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know that text from Aaron, if it was from your teammate or not, but like when you look across the names that are on that team, Shane, like Galan, Lynch, Kyle Hayes, is there and you yourself a very young man, you know, in terms of the longevity of those careers, is there an element of that that's sort of impacting on your maybe emotion or your thought process around leaving that Limerick team, like the excitement that's there for them now, you would think, over the coming years?
Yeah, no, to be honest, whether Limerick are going to be competitive or not going to be competitive remains to be seen. What I do know for a fact is that I extremely miss the group, the crack that we had. Literally, I loved the dressing room. If training's on at 7, you might be there for whatever time, 6:15, and that half an hour in the dressing room beforehand was some laugh. You know, we had my own seat in the Gaelic grounds in the corner, and you know, everything that was there, and that's what I miss. I'll go down. I'll miss the trainings because they're obviously of a very high level. You know, you miss coming home feeling that you've achieved another great training session under your belt, and I'll just miss going down playing hurling. It's as simple as that. Whether Limerick are competitive or not, listen, that's one thing, but I just miss playing the game that I love.
Will you get a chance, Shane, to get down and sort of face-to-face, in so much as it is at the minute, to sort of say a few words to the group?
To be honest, they're probably going to meet in a couple of weeks' time just to maybe talk about plans going forward or whatever the case may be. And it was an option for me that I could have went in and spoke to the group. But knowing how I felt and knowing my emotions over the last 10 days, I felt that wouldn't be possible because I know that I'd have opened my mouth, or even before I opened my mouth, and that would have been it. I wouldn't have been able to speak to them. So I put a video into the WhatsApp yesterday rather than a text message. I can assure you it wasn't a one-take video. And that was as close as I was going to be able to get to speaking to them in person. But, you know, the majority of them, I've spoken to the majority of them since, and, you know, I've been absolutely humbled and honoured by the words that I've received from obviously the people that are close to me, but from across the country. I just can't believe what some people have said, and it really humbles me, and you know what, it makes me emotional because I'm so grateful for what people have said. It really means a lot to me.
I saw a fraction of it online yesterday, Shane, in terms of the people that were getting in touch with you, and it was monster. I presume the phone's been hopping.
Yeah, it has, and I tell you, any person that has contacted me individually, I will be getting back to everybody, because I respect and I thank everybody that took the time out to send me a message, because it means a lot to me. And as I said, online, on social media, I'm on it. I'm not oblivious to it. I see it, and you know, I suppose I've seen bad things down through the years too, like us all. But no, I'm extremely humbled and honoured by, and some of the calibre of people that have contacted me as well. I can't understand why they have, but I greatly appreciate it, and it does mean a lot.
Well, Shane, congratulations on an incredible inter-county career. Very best of luck with what's next with that jog in a few weeks. Hopefully it happens, and hopefully the recovery goes well. Shane Dowling, thanks a million for taking the call.
No problem. Thanks, guys.
Shane Dowling there on the line, retiring from inter-county hurling at the age of 27 this week. Right, later today at 12 o'clock, we'll be giving you another chance to win €1,000 in our new game show, Know Your Football. You can register at the following link, which is quiz.otbsports.com. quiz.otbsports.com is the link. You can simply log in there just before 12 o'clock on Fridays to play along. Know Your Football is brought to you in association with Paddy Power. Check out paddypower.com for their great offers, and always gamble responsibly. Right, delighted to say that we'll be getting stuck into our 27th county. We're almost there, 27 county in our Mt Rushmore series next year on OTB AM, as Aaron Kernan and Niall McCoy join us from Armagh. First though, let's hear from Thursday Night Football and John Giles. Here he is on Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool.
I know you won't like comparing, but to finish up before we take a break then, when you talk about that Ferguson United team and Wenger's Arsenal and Manchester City of last season, how do Liverpool compare?
Oh, they've built. I think he's built the foundation. He's already won the Champions League and the Premiership now, so it's a good start. I think Liverpool are on their way, barring something dreadful, really dreadful, happening to them, which hopefully nobody wants that or wants to even think about it. But that's the only thing that could stop them. What's happened now, Nathan? The only thing that could stop them is that there's so much money in the game now with big clubs. You know. That the power of money is more available now than ever before. I can't see it happening because we've had this bad situation in football where a lot of the big clubs don't even have the money. But the only thing that could tempt the players away would be the financials. I mean, in my day, you couldn't do it. You couldn't leave anyway. I think in the great days, some of the great days at Liverpool, whether the players wanted to move or not, they couldn't move. Times have changed now in that respect, where big clubs could possibly go for some of Liverpool's great players, but it's unlikely. And if that doesn't happen, I can't see anything stopping them, to be quite honest.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Looking for a football show with a bit of a twist?
So I know the likes of Griezmann's big into his fashion.
You wanted a lot. One question he actually asked me was, could he make his studs light up when he runs?
Team 33, the football magazine show for the football purists.
Yeah, the Nike Mercurials from 1998, if you just show that boot to an entire generation of people, and they just get instantly nostalgic and remember everything from that era.
The very best interviews with the cult heroes of the past and a look at the cultural side of football. Team 33, live at 9 p.m. every Friday on OTB Sports Radio. Live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Missing this?
Salah takes the shot. Oh, Mo Salah with one of the goals of the season. Unbelievable.
Then get this, the all-new OTB Sports app. Off the Ball, Ireland's premier sports channel, now has a new home, featuring the biggest names in Irish and world sports. Podcasts, interviews, news, commentary, analysis, plus almost 20 years of sporting archives. All free and ready when you are, at home or on the go. The new OTB Sports app. Download it now from the App Store and Google Play.
It's going to be very unpopular. Thank God we can't go too far. I might have to go back into lockdown.
The bad news is they're all from Waterford.
OTB AM's Mt Rushmore, live every weekday at 7:30 a.m. on OTB Sports Radio.
Time for County Armagh. Adrian, Barry, this has been quite the saga we've been on, quite the journey where we've learned a lot about counties. I think we're going to learn a bit more this morning when it comes to Armagh.
Quite the saga, and you're into it.
Oh, without question. What are we looking at here? Who are the big contenders? If you had to give your very uneducated take on who will be up in the mountain, who's it going to be?
Well, look, that's what it is, as always. It's funny with all of these counties, every time it comes up, obviously the names flash into your head, and like the GAA ones are the main ones, obviously, from an Armagh point of view that you'd be thinking about. There's a few names that you wouldn't necessarily have associated with Armagh as maybe one of the main surprises out of all this thing. Rory Best being one of them. We do tend to think about it in very GAA terms, and Stephen McDonald, Kieran McGeeney, Joe Kernan, given everything that he's done there, there are names that definitely trip off the tongue. Russia McConville, there's how many got
a photo of that 2002 team up on screen at the moment. It's take your pickings from it, but it's also a situation where it's one All-Ireland, but it seems that they're on par with the Tyrone team in terms of the legends that you could pick from it, despite the fact that Tyrone obviously have 3 All-Irelands, and it's going to be very interesting to see who they actually go for. We'll probably need a bit of inside knowledge as to who is the biggest legend from that. Is it Geezer? Is it Kernan? Is it McConville? We actually don't know. Again, my very uneducated take on this would be McGeeney is the one. We're going to have Aaron Kernan with us in just a moment, who should be able... I'm not sure if he's the best person or the worst person placed to give us the correct take on Joe Kernan here, but these guys are all heroes. These guys are, in a county sense, have to be right up there and right in contention. It's just a question of how many GAA people you have, because as you say, you've got Rory Best, you've got Neil Lennon. It's quite a collection of people.
Yeah, the transcendent nature, I think, was definitely a factor for me. Like in all of these, like what's how much beyond the sport did they cut through? And I suppose Kieran McGeeney is certainly one of those names that probably a lot of people who maybe don't know a huge amount about sport or about GAA would always probably have some sort of a recognition for it. But and also what a fascinating county, by the way. Like geopolitically is probably the apt phrase. What fascinating county it is.
Well, we may as well kick off with that. Aaron, Kernan and Niall McCoy, you're very welcome, lads. You're both there.
Lads. Gentlemen.
How are things? Aaron, you're going to be the main OTB selector today. So just to pick up on that point that Adrian made there, could you talk us through the sporting identity of County Armagh, or how complicated that question may even be?
Well, I suppose obviously from our own perspective here where we are in Crossmaglen and South Armagh, obviously Gaelic games would without doubt be our main sport. But I think, as you said, see, whenever we discuss, we can cover all angles sporting, whether that there's horse riding, soccer, rugby, and predominantly in GAA it'll be football. So it is, I'd say probably most of South Armagh, like I said, it'll be based around your GAA Gaelic football. Rugby wouldn't be huge down around this region.
Is there rugby at all down there?
There's not. The nearest that we would have, and there's actually a club that I would have played a wee bit, would actually be Dundalk, but then that's obviously in County Louth, and then you would have Newry and Armagh City rugby teams. The Armagh City themselves would be going really well in recent years. They'd be a very well-run club, and they would actually have a lot of GAA personalities, people who would be involved in fundraising and sponsorship at county board level in both Armagh and Tyrone would be involved in Armagh Rugby Club. So they would be the biggest draw in terms of playing All-Ireland League local to us.
Niall, what's your view on that in terms of what sports lie where, and how important, I guess, Gaelic games and other sports are going to be to your selection today?
Yeah, I suppose Aaron touched on it there. South Armagh, it's almost like an autonomous region. I suppose that goes back to the political sort of side of it, things too. And I suppose South Armagh almost became like a county in its own, and Gaelic was, without doubt, dominated. But as Aaron says, there's a lot more to Armagh sport than South Armagh, and there's a lot more to Armagh than just the Gaelic. But when we were growing up, like I went to the Abbey in Newry, and it was just Gaelic. It was Gaelic. There was no hurling. There was a wee bit of football and then Gaelic football. But I think if you go into the Abbey now, for example, you'll have your basketball, they have a rugby team, they have everything. So I suppose when I grew up, I had no real options other than playing Gaelic football. That was pretty much it. Even hurling in where I live was, you had a bit in Clevie, you had a bit in Camla with the Creebrew Club, and it was pockets, but Gaelic football was just so dominant. And I suppose it's no surprise when you think of South Armagh, in particular, you think of the big Gaelic football players and the men and women have done so much. Up in the mid part of the county, the north part of the county, as Aaron touched on there, that's when you sort of get into a more normal sporting arena where, football and different things like this and field hockey and different things just all sort of are so prevalent. So I always thought it was a unique sort of county in that it was split. And it goes back to, the population of South Armagh. I think it's 90% Roman Catholic in the last census or something like that. So it sort of feeds to that, and it had such a reputation during the dark days too. It was referred to almost as a place on its own. So we probably embraced that part of it as well, being this sort of region that we are proud of. And a lot of people from around here wouldn't say they're from Armagh, they'd say they're from South Armagh. And I suppose that just fed into the whole exclusivity of Gaelic football being the one key sport.
Right, okay.
How tied up in your identity, like so from those days, like Oisin has spoken with us and has spoken plenty before about the choppers landing and the impact that would have had on I suppose your sport and your identity and that kind of. Has that changed then over the years, like in terms of people's, like I know Aaron, you were saying there you played a bit of rugby yourself, like has that changed over the years, or is it still very much your identity is tied up with your sport?
No, I definitely think it has changed in terms of, I would say, our society been a bit more open-minded, a bit more broad-minded. And,
the amount of people who would follow and enjoy rugby, I would say over the past 15, 20 years has really snowballed, where it just was never something that was on our radar. I just think from a participation point of view and actually spectating, Gaelic games is still your biggest sport within Armagh, without doubt, because just the access to clubs. So like I say, in terms of rugby clubs within the whole county, you're talking about Lurgan Rugby Club and Armagh. Newry Rugby Club would be based half a Newry split, but the rugby club would be based almost in Mayo Bridge. So it's not even in the county. And then obviously Dundalk is close to us in South Armagh, but they would play in a Leinster League. So you're talking about 2 rugby clubs really within a whole county. Whenever you're talking Gaelic football clubs, it's mid-40s, the amount that we have. So in terms of giving players access to playing sport, GAA definitely is massive. Another one probably that has skipped by, because just Gaelic games was really all that you could play. Triathlons locally are absolutely massive now. Camla Triathlon about 15 years ago was called Crooked Lake Triathlon, started up, and probably it was always, if you didn't play Gaelic football, you didn't really have another avenue to play or to exercise or to get involved in anything. But definitely that's one area that is huge now across the board, from youth right through to people who probably stopped participating in sport whenever they were very young, and now they're big into it. And I suppose that's great. That shows that we probably are changing a bit, as I said here, and that we're willing to learn, and the options and the opportunities for people there are massive, and that's something that you didn't have, and particularly in the times of the Troubles you definitely didn't have. And I think having our GAA clubs is where we all felt safe and felt included, and I think that's just why the bond is still so strong in the county.
Well, let's get into some of the picks then. How this is going to work is that Aaron is going to be the official OTB selector, and then Niall is going to come in and change one of Aaron's list. So he can put up whoever he wants on the mountain after Aaron's picked his 4. Of course, Aaron, you can make a fantastic case for all 4, and we could proceed with that. Who is your number 1 pick, Aaron Kernan?
Well, I suppose if we come straight in, someone who's really prominent and has just finished up his sporting career would have to be Rory Best. To have an international captain within our county. Rory's from their family is just outside Points Pass, which would be sort of halfway between Portadown and Newry. He obviously would have played his underage rugby and that there in Banbridge, which is County Down, but I think where he's from, we're very much going to claim him as one of our own. But yeah, somebody who had a career with Ulster and Ireland, spanning back to 2005, and to play in the position that he played, and the attrition, and someone, like I say, who dabbles slightly in a wee bit of rugby, standing out in the wing, keeping out of as much trouble as possible, to play in a front row the way he did for the length of time he did was remarkable. World Cups, Lions Tours, Grand Slams, Six Nations, he did it all really, bar winning a World Cup for Ireland, and he's not on his own and missing out on that. Our greatest ever players, and O'Connell, O'Driscoll, O'Garrity's boys, they never achieved any more than he did. And like I say, to the level of consistency he had and the way he carried himself, I think he's definitely he's one of the top sporting men that we've ever produced in our county.
Given the complexities of identity that we've spoken about in the county, is there a pride in him in South Armagh, Aaron, or what's the relationship with Rory Best?
Like, if we're being totally honest, probably the connection genuinely wouldn't be huge, because he's not someone you would ever come across, because he'd be playing obviously in Belfast for Ulster. But I have to say, just in recent times, actually twice earlier this year, I was fortunate enough to be in his company at a couple of sporting functions, and his speaking, he spoke so well at them, and then even just to meet him in person, very welcoming, very humble man, very proud of himself and his family. But one thing that I suppose you'd like to get across as well is that his older brother Simon, we have an under 10 blitz in Crossglen every year, and his brother Simon's family, he has young kids, so their local club in Pints Pass would be O'Hanlon's, and it was brilliant to see them. They were up here last year participating in it, and you had Simon up there encouraging the children, taking part, coaching, helping out. So you go back 15, 20 years ago, would that have happened? Probably not. So just even something small like that there, to see them coming up, coaching kids, enjoying a day out in Crossmaglen was massive. And I think, again, it's another positive to show exactly where our country's going.
Any arguments, Niall?
Absolutely not. An absolute cert. And I think Aaron, I could be wrong, might have played a bit for Banbridge back one pre-season trying to keep fit. So he might be a bit biased there. But no, Rory Best an absolute cert. He's probably one of the first men on the list. And I'm glad he mentioned Simon there as well, because when I was growing up, again, like Aaron, you probably wouldn't have had the connection to rugby that you would have. It would have been at a distance, but you would always heard about the Best brothers, Rory and Simon obviously played for Ireland as well, and then had a few health issues that curtailed his career, but was another fantastic player. But Rory, 4 Six Nation titles, a couple of Grand Slams, one of the most capped players in Irish history. And like Aaron, I wasn't on the panel alongside him, but I went to a few of those talk shows, and he's such an interesting guy. It was the first time I'd ever really heard him speak. I think he's about coming out next year or some stage, but he was just so interesting to listen to. It was a talk show, sort of half GAA, half rugby, and I could have sat and listened to Rory Best all night, to be honest with you. Seemed like a real character, that he'd be stubborn in the change room, and he wouldn't be afraid to say what he meant. And I suppose you don't get to captain your country unless you're willing to sort of make the big calls and push your teammates and do things like that. But on the pitch, like, such a hard, to do it for so long, those battle scars, and to come away and have such a successful career just speaks volumes. Rory Best is an absolute cert.
We'll move on to the second pick then. Rory Best is going up in the mountain. He won't be taken down, clearly. Who have you got as your second pick, Aaron?
Well, I think another fairly obvious candidate from GAA would have to be Kieran Donaghy. His playing career, obviously he joined an Armagh panel in 1990 and played right through to 2007. But just, I suppose, playing ability, obviously was a huge figure on the field as a centre half back, commanding figure, long deliveries, off the left foot. But it was probably his leadership qualities and his sheer desire to be successful and to have those around him successful that makes him stand out. As someone who was fortunate enough to be in a changing room whenever he was captain and going so well, I wouldn't be one for remembering a huge amount of what people would say or how they would get motivated for games. But Geezer in the change rooms before a big championship game, it was a sight to behold, because he'd nearly be in tears, the passion that would be coming out of him. And the one thing that always struck me was nearly the side of his neck. It was nearly like scales, like the hair was standing on the back of his neck, where he was pumped, he was ready for action. And he just spoke with such ferocity and passion that it wasn't hard to get pumped up or to get motivated. Obviously, everyone's focused and driven in their own right, but as you were heading out onto the battlefield and he was giving your last words, it was safe to say that everyone was tuned in and ready to go. So, it was special to be part of that Armagh change room. And like I say, he was the main man, he was the leader, and he was the person that you didn't want to have him staring at you at some stage for messing up for some reason.
Could it be a situation where young members of the panel could live in fear every now and then when you had Kieran Donaghy as your captain?
Yeah, there's no point in telling you otherwise. That is the case, yeah. At that stage, I was 05, I was coming in, it might have been 20, 21. But yeah, you didn't want to catch his eye for not being tuned in or not carrying your weight. He demanded the utmost of himself. And he expected everyone else to follow suit. And to be fair, I think sort of my age group coming through, I think a lot of them did. They weren't too long getting on board and figuring out what needed to be done. It was the first year, he wouldn't have been in his own in that regard. Like, you just had such strong figures and personality that I think it all worked and it all knitted well. McGrain was equally as driven. James Myers, and they gave me one of the greatest humiliations I ever had my first night in Armagh training, and just pummeled me into the ground in tackling grids. It was a reality, but I suppose I was used to it in having to John, Tony McGinty, Francie Value, doing similar to me at club level. So I just think we had a great mix at that time of obviously superb quality, but just strong personality, strong leaders. And I suppose that just speaks volumes for Geezer and the personality he had, and that he was still always seen as the leading figure in that regard within that group.
Niall, you've also gone for Kieran McGeeney here. Did journalists live in fear of Kieran McGeeney, the Armagh captain, as much as his teammates did?
Yes, we did. No, the funny thing, Kieran wouldn't be massive for media stuff, you know. He's just one of these boys. He doesn't really think that it's a necessity. Like, you know, he'll do what he has to do, but he doesn't feel that he needs to play the media or anything like that. And I think it's quite interesting. He doesn't do a lot of post-match stuff. Jim McCarry generally does the post-match. Unless Armagh lose, Kieran will come out and does the media stuff generally when Armagh lose after a championship match. So that's probably just another one of his sort of qualities. He feels he probably has to front up when things are going bad. But when he is doing press conferences, particularly pre-match, he is absolutely fantastic to talk to, and a bit like Rory Best, you could just sit and listen to him all day. And people have this sort of idea of him being a dour and sort of robotic and all, but if you get Kieran McGeeney in a good environment and listen to him chatting, he's fantastic. He's brilliant, and he's very opinionated, very strong in those opinions. Again, I'm not going to argue with Aaron there. He's a cert for one of these four places. Like, you know, Kieran probably mythical status amongst Armagh fans in that run, you know, going from probably 2000 onwards, right up to 2005, 2006. I was trying to find out a few weeks ago about his trip to New Zealand, and there's not much on it, but you know, the rumours were that he went to New Zealand and you know, trained with rugby teams and all there for a few months. And you know, it was probably the first time I had heard of someone going and taking time away from everything just to train almost professionally. And he just, you know, his physique and everything, he just looked after himself so well. Like, he came on to the Armagh team as a scrawny cornerback and turned into this centre half that you just could not move. And as Aaron said there, that 02 team was just laced with unbelievable characters and unbelievable talent. I watched a lot of the big games there in lockdown, and it's amazing just how good Paul McGrain in particular is, that maybe doesn't get the credit as being one of the best players to ever play for Armagh, but seem to just tie it all together, fans, players, teammates. And even now, as manager, talking to the Armagh players, nothing's changed in terms of his team talks. You know, Aaron talks about, you know, near tears and you're just running through walls. You talk to any of the current Armagh players and they agree to just see his team talks, his motivation is absolutely inspirational. But he'll cut you down the sides if you need it. You know, he's not a soft touch. So I'd say he brought Armagh football to a new level just by everything he'd done. But a lot of people helped him along the way, but he was the figurehead, the right king of it.
So we've got Rory Best, we've got Kieran McGeeney. They're both definitely going up on the mountain. Aaron, we'll stick with GAA here. Have you decided which is going to be the next GAA name to go up on the mountain?
Yeah, this one probably a bit more awkward for me, but I'll go with my father for this one. I suppose I owe him one because I got plenty of stick down 3 years. Wouldn't have gotten any team, only he was the one who was picking me. So I'll repay the faith here. Yeah, it's like I said, it is a tricky one for me, but I just feel that in terms of the success that we've had, particularly in the county over this past 20 years, you do need the players, which obviously we had at both club and county. But growing up in the house that we grew up in, and knowing the drive, passion and vision that he had for the teams he was over, I would say myself, and I know the brothers would be the same, very fortunate He always was thinking of the bigger picture. He took over a Crossmaglen team, and he was never just thinking about winning an Armagh club championship. He was talking about winning Ulsters, talking about winning All-Irelands, stuff that was never done before. And to be honest with you, obviously it's quite a while ago, and I was very young, so I didn't really appreciate the enormity of what he actually was talking about doing, or how he was going to go about doing it. But to sit back now and to see that he was involved in so many successful teams, and helped so many families to achieve the ultimate, something that I'm very proud of. I was delighted to be obviously able to play under him at club and county level as well. And like I say, in terms of the level of detail and the vision that he had, and to be able to get so many people on board, I think was a special trait. Obviously the playing personnel, he always felt that he had it at Cross, and he felt that he had it with Armagh. But he was never afraid to go outside to ask for advice or help or get other figures in, and he did that throughout his career. And I can think back to the very start. I was speaking to Tommy yesterday, just giving him a bit of an insight, or he was asking a bit of an insight, but I can remember it was 96. There was it was a Hastings Cup. It used to be an under-21 league before the championship started, and I can't remember who Armagh were playing anyway, but he was going to collect the players after it, because Crossmaglen were heading to Ballincollig in Cork to play a gold watch tournament, and so we were heading down on the Friday, and it was played on Saturday, Sunday, St Patrick's weekend, and coming home Sunday evening. So from memory, I think it was Oisin McConville, Tony and John McEntee and that he picked up, and he told the managers or his selectors going down the road in the bus with the rest of the players, there's been no drink, we mean business, we're going down here this weekend. So I can remember I probably about 11, 12 years of age, and we get into the clubhouse in Ballincollig late on that Friday evening, and sure, the whole place was going mad. The players were having a good time, and his two selectors were having an even better time. So I can just remember he just sort of says to me and some of us, just stand over out of the way a second here, and pull the selectors outside, and wasn't happy with what was going on anyway. But there was a clear the air meeting the next morning, and it was, we were down here to mean business. I don't care how foggy the heads are, we're here to do a job. So in fairness, they won the semi-final, final. We're getting presented with the gold watches, but at that stage I can remember him saying that we'll not be back to defend our title next year. The All-Ireland Club final was just over on TV. They're all watching the Ballincollig club rooms, and he says we'll not be back next year because we're going to win the All-Ireland Club. And at that stage, Cross hadn't even won an Armagh championship in 10 years, let alone winning an All-Ireland club title. But it's just the sort of thing, he was probably putting pressure on himself, and he was putting pressure on the team by saying something like that there. But I think he was letting them know how genuine he was in his vision for them. And like I say, the rest is history from that regard.
Aaron, we could talk to you about your father for a long time, I dare say, this morning. Unfortunately, we're very tight in time. Niall, I don't think we're going to get any disagreements here. I think you're going for Joe Kernan as well.
Yeah, I'm not providing much opposition here at all. I'll run through, I had three sort of candidates for this position. I'll run through the other two very quickly. Oisin McConville, I suppose, to use an American term, the ultimate clutch player for club and county, just done it all, won it all. Didn't matter how bad he was for 69 minutes, he didn't take him off the field because he had scored a winner so often. The other person I want to mention, Caroline O'Hanlon, just a legend of the ladies' game, and a former player of the year, three All-Stars I think Caroline possibly has, and also plays professional netball in Manchester, has played for Northern Ireland, has represented Northern Ireland in 3 Commonwealth Games, ties those two sports in with being a doctor, and I just don't know how she does it. I don't know where she finds the Joe, I think people forget that Joe was such an unbelievable player for Armagh too, like a 2-time All-Star, a 3-time Ulster winner, a swashbuckling midfielder on a really strong Armagh team that went so close to All-Ireland glory. And it's the wee things about his management, like we all know the story about slamming the runners-up medal off the wall and things like that, but I remember hearing wee things like when he was with Cross and they were playing in an Ulster Club Championship that mightn't have been true or not, but that they got the sent down heaters to heat up the changing room, and I think it's wee things like that you wouldn't even think of until you hear that other managers have done it. Like you're going down to play an Enniskillen or something on a November, and the team are coming in and it's not a freezing changing room. wee things like that, for me, for good managers, are the difference. Just those wee touches that just elevate teams to that other wee level, a couple of percent. And with Armagh, listen, there was a lot of work done. You know, the two Bryans deserve unbelievable credit. They brought Armagh to a real level, but it just took Joe to get them over the edge, and he just brought that extra couple of percent that just got Armagh to the ultimate glory. And for me, that's the sign of a good manager, who can just see a team that's been doing something and just get an extra 5% out of them just by wee changes and good tactics and good team selections. And listen, his honour speak for himself. He's done it all, and Armagh were just an unbelievable team under him, an absolutely incredible team. Should have probably won a second All-Ireland, but when you look back and look at the Ulster titles and the fact that they did win the All-Ireland, I think it just speaks volume about Joe's impact on Armagh.
Well, the good news here is that we've got agreement on all three names. So we've got Rory Best so far, we've got Joe Kernan, and we've got Kieran McGeeney. We've also got agreement on our last name. Our last name, Aaron, is Neil Lennon.
Yeah, Neil Lennon actually started out his career with Geezer. They played for Armagh Miners in 1989, and then obviously he switched allegiance to soccer across the water, and obviously had a hugely successful career at both club, representing Northern Ireland, and obviously particularly in management with Celtic. So to be fair, like, soccer in the Lurgan area, you'd have a lot of very strong and traditional clubs within GAA down there, but soccer would be huge. And I think someone like Neil, to be coming from a Catholic background, you know, and to still go and to represent Northern Ireland, I know at times it wouldn't have been easy on him, and there was difficulties, but so many, you know, Catholics across the north, soccer would be their number one sport, and he would have been one of the leading lights. Particularly, like a lot of your Catholics in the north would affiliate, obviously, with Celtic, and to see him putting himself out there to play for Celtic and still go and play for Northern Ireland, like, I think that takes a lot of battle and a lot of leadership, because he could have been taking flack from all angles to do that there. So I think it just sort of shows the strength of character that he had himself, obviously, to go with his playing ability. So definitely he's up there with one of the biggest lights that you would have in soccer terms within the county.
Are you happy enough to go along with that, Niall? Are you going to rubber stamp the Neil Lennon selection?
Yeah, it's funny, I'll mention just while we're on soccer, I suppose perhaps you could argue and say that the person who's had the biggest impact from Armagh in world sport is probably someone that 99.9% of people in Armagh have never heard of, a fellow William McCrum, who, despite being a goalkeeper, invented the penalty. And like, you just think penalty shootouts and penalties in world football, just the impact they've had. And BBC did a show, and Guy Lineker came and visited his grave and said, "You have a lot to answer for, you know." But we wouldn't have heard, most people haven't heard of William McCrum. I just thought it was interesting that someone from around here has had such a big say in, I suppose, the direction of football. But yeah, Neil Lennon, listen, it was so difficult. It mightn't have been that long ago, but it was so difficult to be a Catholic playing for Northern Ireland. You know, there was graffiti and different things like that. Later in his career, 2011, he got bullets in the post and different things like that. And I always admired that side of his game. You know, a boy that won a couple of League Cups with Leicester and all, and what he's done with Celtic as a player and a manager, you know, that's incredible. But I always admired his strength of character and that side of thing, because Northern Ireland, in the north here, a lot's changed in the last 10, 15 years. But if you go back 20 years ago, it was a different place. It was a very difficult place. And if you were a Catholic playing for Northern Ireland, you were really, really standing out. And he took a lot of slack for that. It wouldn't be the same now, thank God, not in the slightest. Everyone's moved on and it's brilliant. But that's what always stood out for me, is strength of character, taking so many blows, and he just keeps bouncing back and rubbing it in plenty of people's faces with those celebrations. But he's had such a great career, success-wise and character-wise, for me. So yeah, he's my fourth pick.
Very good. So for the first time, I think we've been doing 27 of these. For the first time, we've actually got full agreement between the two Mt Rushmore. So it's great. We've got Rory Best, we've got Joe Kernan, we've got Kieran McGeeney, and we've got Neil Lennon. The final question, Aaron, is where is this mountain going to be located?
It has to be the side of Slieve Gullion, doesn't it? Everyone coming down south or heading down south or coming up north, you can see it clearly there. It's over Niall's part of the country. They call it the Gap of the North. the motorway runs by it. So no, that's your ideal location for it.
You happy enough with that, Niall?
I'm happy enough. That's a bit of a tourism boost for Drummatee, so yeah, bring it on.
Get working on
it. Great stuff, lads. Thanks a million for taking the call. So that's your Armagh Mt Rushmore.
OTB AM's Mt Rushmore.
There you go. A fairly impressive list, Adrian, I think it's fair to say. The two rather than the three GAA picks, I think that's that was the only question really. But Joe Kernan, good to see. I think it would have been an easier decision for Aaron to not actually pick his father in that one. So fair play to him for actually doing it, is what I say.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it was good insight into him as well, wasn't it? Like that was the kind of key to it. And like we sort of discussed at the start of it, there are few other counties. I mean, some others up the north, but few others that have their sport so tied up with their identity. And it was fascinating to get an insight into that as well.
Yeah. That is it from OTB AM this morning. Thanks a million for joining us. If you missed anything from the show, you can catch it back on the OTB AM podcast. We timestamp it for you so that you can flick through to all the bits that you're interested in. So today we had Shane Dowling on having to retire from inter-county hurling at 27, Kieran Donaghy on the week that was in the GAA, and football with Phil and that Armagh Mt Rushmore. We'll see you again on Monday morning with OTB AM. We're live every weekday morning, by the way, from 7:30, and we've still got plenty to come for you on the OTB Sports app today. So you can go to search for OTB Sports in your App Store or in your Android Play Store. State of the Union is live next. That's first up. And then there's the Paddy Power half hour, looking ahead to the weekend's football. And at 12 o'clock then, 12 midday, is our Know Your Football quiz, which you can still sign up to. And then Friday Night Racing is live from 3 o'clock. And OTB returns tonight from 7 o'clock as ever on your radio. Right, Dr. James Robson joins Keith Wood next for State of the Union.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
This is OTB AM.
I was happy with how I was performing off the back of the first two games. Obviously didn't go to plan against England, which was good, but it had nothing to do with me being captain.